sir. No. No.
So it's kind of like the last one.
Very similar to the last one.
Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead. I'll call the meeting to order. Karen, can we please have a roll call?
Yes. Chair Corby Chappelle,
Here?
Sally Cohen,
Here.
Jose Oliveros,
Here.
Jordan Carpenter,
Here.
Becky J,
Here.
Alex Paraskovas.
Okay, before we get to opening the public hearing, we have a section called Visitors and Public Comments. Are there any folks here wishing to speak or have questions to ask other than what we're having a meeting about tonight? Okay. And I'll go ahead and move on to the next part. Hello, I am Corby Chappelle, the Chair of the Planning Commission and Chairperson for this hearing. I now open a public hearing on a Type 2 subdivision, SUB-2022-02. The date is May 30th, 2023, and the time is 6:33 p.m. This hearing is being recorded. The hearing today is a Type 2 application for Brandy Meadows Phase 5 through 9. The applicant property owners are Brandy Group LLC and David and Joan Stettiger. This hearing is considered a quasi-judicial hearing. That means that the Planning Commission must make a decision that is based on the evidence presented and the applicable code provisions, follow rules in order to protect the constitutional due process rights of the parties, determine whether the application satisfies the applicable criteria as presented or can satisfy the applicable criteria with conditions, and support its decision with findings of fact. The applicable substantive criteria that apply to this application are Independence Development Code Sections 10, General Provisions 11, Administrative Provisions 23, Mixed Density Residential MX Zone, and 90 Subdivision Regulations. These are contained in the written staff report and will be identified and discussed in the oral staff report provided at this hearing, ORS 197.797-5A. Your testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or the city's development code that you believe to be applied to this application, ORS 197.797-5B. The evidence that the Planning Commission will rely on to make a decision is not subject to the rules of evidence used in court. Evidence will be accepted if it is applicable to the criteria and is the kind of evidence that is reasonably prudent person would rely on in making important personal decisions. An issue which may be the basis for an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals shall be raised not later than the close of the record or the final evidentiary hearing on the proposal. Such issues must be raised and accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Planning Commission and the parties an adequate opportunity to respond to the issue. Failure to do so may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals of a decision on this application based on that issue, ORS 197.797-1 and 197.797-5C. Failure to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the city to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court, ORS 197.796-3B. The individual making an argument has the burden of proving their point. In other words, base your argument on evidence or explain why it is relevant to the applicable criteria. The Planning Commission is prohibited from making a decision based merely on feelings or opinions. The ultimate burden of providing that all applicable criteria are satisfied falls on the applicant. The applicant must meet this burden based on a predominance of evidence. The record for this hearing consists of all materials submitted by the applicant, comments received to date, and through this hearing and the staff report. If you have comments or evidence that you'd like to be specifically considered in the decision, then you must formally provide that evidence or argument during the hearing, either in writing or in oral presentation. You may request to keep the record open after this public hearing, but you must make the request before the record closes. The applicant always gets the last word and will have 7 days after the close of this hearing to submit final written argument unless the applicant waives that right. If you intend to present oral testimony, please fill out a request to speak form located at the recorder's desk and give that to city staff. Again, we are recording this hearing, so please also clearly state your name, spell it if you think that is necessary, and provide your address. This will also help in preparing accurate written minutes of the hearing and also assist with mailing copies of the decision to all interested parties. If you have written testimony or other evidence to submit, please give that to the staff so it can be entered into the record. Given the number of people present, we ask that with 2 exceptions, each speaker limit themselves to no more than 5 minutes. Please note that all presentations will be timed. You will be informed when your allotted time has expired. All speakers exceeding the time limit we ask by the chair to immediately conclude his or her remarks. If you do not finish your presentation in the time allotted, be sure to provide a written copy of your statement to staff. The applicant will not be limited to 3 minutes. In order to maximize or minimize repetitive testimony, organizations are encouraged to have only one person speak for the group, with other members of the organization standing to show their support. Each person may testify only once unless called back to the podium at the request of a planning commission member to respond to a question. Thank you for your cooperation. Okay, because this is a quasi-judicial hearing, the applicant has a right to an impartial decision-making body. Impartial means that the members of the planning commission have not prejudged the application, are open to hear all consider all evidence and arguments presented, do not have any conflict of interest, and have not had non-disclosed ex parte contacts. All members of the planning commission are required to disclose any conflicts of interest and ex parte contacts that we have had with the proposal or applicant. That is, whether they have any financial or other personal interest in the proposal and whether we have spoken with anybody about the proposal of this hearing. Do any of the planning commission members wish to disclose for the record any conflicts of interest or ex parte contacts? No one has declared that. Does anyone wish to challenge the planning commissioner's impartiality or any of the disclosures made by the planning commission? Okay. Finally, before we hear the staff report, I will provide an overview of the procedure that we will follow for this quasi-judicial hearing. First, staff will present the staff report, applicable criteria, and recommendation. Then the applicant will then have an opportunity to present the proposal and address any issues raised by the staff report and recommendation. Next, I will first ask to hear from people who would like to speak in favor of the proposal. I will then ask to hear from people who have neutral comments or questions about the proposal, neither for nor against. Those in opposition to the proposal will have an opportunity to present testimony, starting with the petitioners. Staff may then present additional material and recommendations based on the presentation's evidence and public testimony. The applicant will be given the opportunity to have the last word and rebut any testimony or evidence presented by staff or through public testimony. After this step, the Planning Commission chair will close the record and the Planning Commission will begin deliberations toward a decision. Once the Planning Commission makes a decision, notice will be mailed within 7 days of the decision to the applicant and participants in this hearing. The Planning Commission's decision is final unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days from the date of the notice of the decision. Okay, at this point, we can go ahead and have the staff report, Fred.
Perfect. I forgot my pointer, so I'm gonna go grab it. But hi there, everybody. My name is Fred. I'm the city planner here at the City of Independence, and I am very happy to be presenting this staff report to you folks today for Brandy Meadows. Let's call it phases 5 through 9. Now, when we look at the traffic impact analysis, you'll see that it's called Brandy Meadows number 4, phases 5 through 9, and I want to distinguish phases 5 through 9 are different than Brandy Meadows number 5, okay? It's confusing, I know, but I just right off the bat, I want to identify that because there is, if we get if we don't distinguish those two things, it might get a little confusing a little later on. So I'm gonna call it Brandy Meadows phases 5 through 9. And that's this project that we're talking about. Anything beyond this project is development by others, or what is called as Brandy Meadows number 5 in the traffic impact analysis. Clear, maybe? Okay.
Say that one more time.
Okay, so, so this development we're calling Brandy Meadows phases 5 through 9. Let's just call it that. Future development by others is in the traffic impact analysis, the first one called Brandy Meadows number 5.
Which refers to future.
Which refers to future development. All right, okay. Because no surprise here, one of the things that we're going to talk about a fair amount tonight is traffic. So based on that, let me sort of give an overview of the staff report. Hey, Karen, you got that one document I sent you with the various slides? So the development is a 98 lot subdivision. It includes phases 5, 6, 6A, 7, 8, and 9. Phase 9 includes a multifamily lot on the southern end of the property. The rest of the site includes, go to page 2 of that. We could just look at that for a while. The project includes a stormwater pond, a trail, and open space along the South Fork of Ash Creek. Point to it. It includes an improved South 12th Street, which would function as a collector for the area. It includes an extended Chestnut Street, which will eventually connect with a bridge that will go over the South Fork of Ash Creek in that area. It has townhouse lots oriented to Chestnut Street and the South 12th Street, which is shown as South 13th Street in the plans. It includes duplex lots, typically on larger corner parcels. Can you scroll down even to the next page?
I'm technically challenged, sorry.
Oh, no, that's a bad sign for all of us.
That's pretty good. Make that just a hair bit bigger, and we'll call that.
Trying to share one too.
So perfect. So just to start off, the stormwater pond is in this area. That is where the current stormwater pond is. There is a trail that continues north along here, along the back side of this. This is the South Fork of Ash Creek right here. It includes townhouse lots facing Chestnut Street, which is right here, and South 12th Street, which is right here, shown as South 13th Street on the plan. It includes duplex lots, typically on corner lots, larger corner lots, and that's sort of similar. I can't see the different intuition in color, but it's essentially the corner lots is where we find the duplex lots. It includes multi-generational homes, typically in middle block portions of the site. So you'll see some of those multi-generational homes out there. That is something that they've been building out there, as well as the duplexes previously.
Fred?
Yes?
What is a multi-generational home?
Right now, it's essentially a single-family home with an attached ADU. I think that's an attached accessory dwelling unit. That's what
It's not a two-story, one story is one family and the first story is a different family, or?
So how they've built it so far is they've tended to have the accessory dwelling unit over the garage portion
Okay.
of the site. I'm sure that Chet can talk about that just a little bit.
Okay, I just wondered, thank you.
Yep. Another component of the site is a large stormwater pond along Jefferson Street here. It would also include a portion of Mountain Fir Avenue, which will be a future arterial through the site. Again, this future development by others is not included in this, so it wouldn't connect all the way to the west side of here. It would connect to right here, Mountain Fir Avenue. And it would include a site for multifamily on the south portion of the site as well. Right? Sort of picturing it, Brandy Meadows phase 1 is about right here. Phase 2 is something like this, and then 3 and 4 is about right here. So just so you can get your orientation, Liberty Place is right here, Sunset Meadows is right here. We have received 4 comments on this application so far. One was a comment, those are included in your packet. 2 of them came in on Friday. Those 2 were from attorneys, and they were encouraging the Planning Commission to reconsider how conditions 2 and 3 were written, just to ensure that there was an essential nexus associated with the improvement that condition 2 and 3 relate to, which is a light at 7th Street and Monmouth. Another thing that they argued was that we have that improvement was proportional with the impact associated with it. So essentially proportionality and a nexus, right? A rough proportionality and a nexus to the improvement. We'll talk about that more later. Some of the other comments that we got were related to traffic. The traffic comment has been addressed with the traffic impacts analysis that were provided. Another comment dealt with the amount of access points into the neighborhood. Currently, 7th Street handles a lot of traffic. I'm sorry, 7th Street. It's the primary way in and out, and one of the comments expressed concern about having so much of the traffic just associated with that street. We have been working with Polk County Fire District Number 1 as well as our building department to ensure that all fire, health, and life safety concerns associated with the building code, the International Building Code have been met. Also, the fire marshal has looked at the plans. One of the comments raised concerns about 7th Street and the character of 7th Street. As part of that, they questioned something about speed and what would if something could be done to calm the traffic along 7th Street. Currently, the street has more than 2,000 vehicles per day. It's considered a collector in our transportation system plan. As a collector with more than 2,000 vehicles per day, the city could decide that if we wanted to, we could put in bike lanes and remove parking along the street. I know that that's something that we talked about when Brandy Meadows 2 through 4 came last time, a couple of years ago. We've sort of shied away from that over time because ultimately we think if you remove cars from the street and you add bike lanes, ultimately the speeds along the street are going to go much faster. As such, we feel like it's a larger philosophical sort of question that we should have as a community rather than this board trying to consider it as part of this land use application. As such, we didn't address it as part of this staff report, though we know that it's something that we should absolutely talk about. One comment asked about lot sizes. The lot sizes are completely consistent with our MX zone. I can talk about that in a little bit. And a final comment asked about where will the folks go to school in the area. That is not something that this commission considers. However, the school district we know has been in the process of a capital facilities plan or long range facilities plan update. I don't know if that got adopted or if it's near to adoption. but we didn't address that as part of this either. That's Central School District's purview. We have been involved with that process though. All that being said, and I'll go into some of this stuff in more detail in just a second, but my recommendation was to approve the proposal with 19 conditions as well as 3 potential conditions based on some of these letters from the attorneys. We can discuss conditions 2 and 3 a little bit more, but we do recommend that those get tweaked a little bit. So, is that the little document there, Karen? Can we just start scrolling through it and start pointing out stuff? Perfect. So the site is right here. It is in the MX zone. The MX zone applies to this larger southwest area. This MX zone is intended to be a flexible zone. It's intended to primarily apply to this portion, which was at the time that the Southwest Concept Plan was created, undeveloped. And it was intended to provide a degree of flexibility for folks to go in and construct a range of housing types, including duplexes, single-family homes, accessory dwelling units, or things like multifamily. The standards for that zone are in subchapter 23. One of the standards is, in fact, that they actually have to have at least 15% of the units in multifamily or attached single-family structures. This proposal would actually go beyond that amount. Some of the lot sizes for the zone include as small as 3,500 square feet for a single-family detached lot, or 2,500 for an attached single-family lot. Based on all of that stuff, the proposal is consistent with those standards. Some of the things related to lot coverage we'll look at the time of the building permit to make sure that those lot coverages are met. We'll also look at things like building height at that time to ensure that building heights are not exceeded. Now, going on to the next thing. This is really sort of the map of the Southwest Concept Zone that was created, and I want to say it was that 2012 or 2010? 12? 2012. So anyways, this sort of displays what that plan was envisioning. You'll see that the plan included a mix of housing types. The red represented places where higher density could occur. And then the green represents things like an amenity that was envisioned as the trail, as a trail along the South Fork of Ash Creek. Continuing on, you can see the subject property is right there. That plan was sort of echoed in the in the Parks and Open Space Master Plan. I'm sorry, I can't really see it. Can you zoom in on the south portion of the community just a little bit? That plan was echoed, and you'll see here that it called for, again, trails along the South Fork of Ash Creek to connect ultimately to Inspiration Garden, then the trail down through Sunset Meadows Park. That this project would be consistent with that. It would continue this trail through this little bend of the South Fork of Ash Creek, and this portion of the trail extends up through Brandy Meadows phases 2 through 4 along the east side of the creek right there. Go on to the next one, Karen. The plan, the Southwest Concept Plan called for things like bike amenities along major streets through the area, and this project would further those concepts. Can you go to the next one, Karen? I think it's on the next one. That plan was sort of refined by our transportation system plan, which called for a shared bike facility on one side of the road, and then just a sidewalk on the other. Essentially, a shared bike facility on one side of the road, and and then just a sidewalk, and then parking right there. This project right here would take that concept and go one further. You folks will remember when I realized I took a bike class just recently, and I realized that this idea right here has one limitation, and it's the fact that you might have a kid on a bike or something going contraflow when no one's expecting. So somebody might be looking left, trying to get out, and then turn right into a kid right here, right, coming contraflow for that. And so based on that, we talked with the applicant about, instead of using this concept here, to essentially create a shared use facility on both sides of the road, to remove any sort of bike lane on the street and then still have parking on one side of the road to eliminate that contraflow traffic. Also, we feel like this approach is a good way to then transition into the bike lanes that are present right now on Chestnut Street. So you can come off a vertically and horizontally separated bike facility onto the bike lane safely. And this is really one of the things that our transportation system plan, which called for this, wanted was low stress bicycle network for people of all ages and abilities. And this is really a good way to do that. So based on that, they are meeting a number of our criteria related to the transportation system plan, the Southwest concept plan, all that sort of stuff. Can you go to the next one too? One place where it kind of gets weird is on Mountain Fir Avenue. Under the Southwest concept plan, it calls for bike lanes on the street, but then it also calls for a separated shared use path, which just really feels weird. It's because you would essentially have two separate bike facilities on the same road. And so based on that, what one of the potential conditions is that, and it's potential condition one, that that this road design be modified to be more like the collector's street thing that I was just showing you. Does that make sense? Was that making sense to everybody? Not really. Okay. So can you zoom in just a little bit, Karen? Just to explain it just a little bit more, you'll see right here, this is a bike lane, this is a bike lane, and then this is a shared use path. So that's essentially two bike facilities on the same road. And you don't need two bike facilities on the same road. Also, we're just looking at this in relation to that future development by others. And when we look at that future development by others, we see a whole row of townhouses on the west end of that street that are anticipated. What I don't see here, though, is any parking. And so this would give, by eliminating the bike lanes and putting them up on a shared facility, you could reallocate some of that space for parking, which would then be able to serve those townhouse lots in a much better way. So that is one of the conditions that you'll note within it. I think, like I said, there's potential condition A. I feel like I could keep on talking forever. Let's go to the next one and just look at this. Another thing that they are doing is exactly what is anticipated in our Southwest concept plan. You'll see the Southwest concept plan wanted sort of the combination of parks, and stormwater along the South Fork of Ash Creek, including things like trails. This is exactly what they've proposed as part of this application. Go to the next slide, Karen. You'll note that they have a trail along the South Fork of Ash Creek. They've got a stormwater facility, and then they've got a riparian area here. Some of this is flatter and more usable for sort of passive recreational use. Some of it is just wooded. Like, I think some of the best riparian habitat we have is actually down here, in this portion of phase 2, 4. So they are really achieving what was anticipated within the plan. We have the requirement that within the development, you have to provide either a certain proportion of the site as park and open space or pay a fee in lieu. They have, with this approach, they will have met that sufficiently. So based on that, that's like, this is a big old staff report. I tried to just fly through some of the key things that I was looking for in regards to it. What I will go into just a little bit more now, though, is traffic, because traffic feels like it's a key issue associated with this application. Now, going back to the letters, I should have handed these out earlier. I'm sorry. Better keep one, pass them down, and then when they get to Karen, some of those, I got 18. Pass them out earlier. Some of the things associated with traffic are, again, the rough proportionality and the essential nexus. So originally, when we got this application, the TIA, and I'll just read from it for a second, the traffic impact analysis said that traffic signal warrants are met at the intersection of Monmouth Street and 7th Street in the year 2024 with the build out of phases 5 through 6A of the proposed development. Warrants were not met at the intersections of Monmouth Street and 4th Street or Ice Street, River Road, and South Main Street under any future traffic conditions. As part of that analysis, one of the things that got kind of confusing about it was it included that Brandy Meadows 5, the future development by others, as part of the background conditions. And so that made the intersection look like it was going to fail much quicker than it would without that development. Now that development hasn't come to you folks at all. It will come to you folks in the future. Traffic impacts will be evaluated at that time, but it has not been approved or anything yet. It shouldn't have been incorporated in those background conditions. As such, we asked the question, what happens when you take that out of the background conditions? What happens to the traffic? Revised traffic impact analysis and addendum to the traffic impacts analysis was submitted, and that found that the 7th Street and Monmouth did not meet warrants under background conditions through 2027, but it did once phases 5, 6, and 6A were submitted. And platted and approved and all of that stuff and built. So based on that, based on that, we recommended 2 conditions. Essentially, one, that the applicant should perform an intersection control evaluation, and then 2, that they should fund, they should pay for the improvement. And then we said, beyond that, you can decide how you want to proportion out that improvement. What we heard from the attorneys was that is not an appropriate way to determine the rough proportionality of the improvement, and potentially it's not a clear and objective requirement to then put on the development. We understand that, we looked at that. And so what this then does is what this document I tried to do is just explain sort of how we get to some rough try and go through it just real quick because I know I've been talking for quite a while. So in looking at the proportionality, we saw that it did not meet traffic signal warrants as of 2022. It was not anticipated to meet traffic signal warrants as of 2027 without the development of Brandy Meadows 4 or 5. Also, for number 4 or 5, the development by others. So this is where it gets confusing. All right. Yeah.
I'm just wondering what data is being used, because in the study in the packet we got, they cited 2019 data and some from September of 2022, but only 2 hours worth. And since 2019, scores of homes have been built down there, and doing a study, to me, should take into more time, and especially school days when people are transporting children and back. So I'm confused as to what data is being used and how current it is. Or concerned, not confused. I guess I should say concerned.
Okay. The applicant can address that more as part of their
Okay.
presentation.
Well, you had noted the study in this too, so that's kind of,
Yeah, okay.
sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. So it doesn't require it under background conditions. The intersection doesn't require, I'm sorry, this is gonna get kind of confusing. So under existing conditions and under future growth, without this subdivision or the development by others, the intersection does not require a traffic signal. It does not meet traffic signal warrants. The City of Independence actually doesn't consider the intersection as a priority. In our intersection, in our transportation system plan, one of the things we looked at this intersection, we considered alternatives at this intersection. We considered a left turn lane, we considered a stoplight, we considered all of those things at this intersection. And one of the things that we identified was we wanted to achieve network connectivity, better connectivity within the network instead of just connectivity at the intersection. The reason for that is ultimately we only partially solve our transportation problem that we put in the light. The traffic impact analysis itself said if you install a light at 7th Street, potentially you back up queues on Monmouth Street to 4th Street. So by putting a light on Monmouth, you just increase the amount of traffic on Monmouth. And so what our transportation system plan identified was, let's try and build out a network, and rather than funneling everybody to a couple of main east-west roads, let's try and distribute them better through a network. And then you don't have the pinch points at the various places. That was the goal of our transportation system plan. As such, there was no project for a signal at 7th and Monmouth. The transportation system plan anticipated that during peak hours, there would be an increase of 1,300 roughly trips at the intersection to 1,844 trips. Of that increase, Brandy Meadows, this proposal, and Brandy Meadows number 5, the future development by others, would account for 57% of the additional anticipated trips. We know that because we got the traffic impact analysis that evaluated them both together. Both developments, 4 and the future development by others, would contribute to 57% of the anticipated trips, or 312 trips, additional trips to that intersection. So 57% of the total anticipated within the transportation system plan. That would be really easy to say, okay, well then those two developments should pay 57% of that impact potentially then, right? But it seems to me that we're not so much concerned about just how traffic moves west through and east through the intersection. if traffic just all went west and east through the intersection, it would handle itself fairly well, right? Because traffic goes like this. It's when you start putting in different movements, like a left turn on northbound traffic, that all of a sudden things get more difficult, or a left turn from westbound traffic, right? And so based on that, just looking at the traffic impact analysis again, and looking at like the northbound trips from the two developments would account for something like 106% of the capacity anticipated within the transportation system plan. So it anticipated a certain number of trips heading north. This would account for 106% of those trips. These two developments together. The applicant argued that only 5% of the overall trips at the intersection would be associated with the development's traffic, and as a result, they should only pay 5.5%. That does not seem appropriate to me because, one, it assumes that there is no capacity at the intersection at present when at least 1,400 vehicles can go through the intersection during peak hours, according to the traffic impact analysis. It also assumes that all traffic movements are similar, and some coming from the north will have, or coming north will have more of an impact at the intersection. Also, according to the traffic impact analysis, roughly 47% of the additional traffic at the intersection would be associated with Brandy Meadows 4. When you include the future development by others, the subdivisions would contribute to 77% of the additional northbound trips. This subdivision would contribute to 77% of the northbound trips. When you compare them both together would contribute to 95% of the future northbound trips, just in the analyses themselves. So based on all of this, the city doesn't consider this a priority. Some of this is being driven by the development. I'll say much of this is being driven by the development and the developments together. Both of these are owned by one party that are then getting sold to different parties, and this site is contributing to a huge portion of the development there at the impacts of that intersection. Karen, can you go to that one slide? The applicant has finally, and then I'll hopefully stop talking for a while. The applicant has argued that, next slide, has argued that a number of properties would benefit from this. Next one, too. But I'll just call attention to, and thankfully I went to a next map too. Go to the next one. When we look at just the geography of the area, and we start considering that we've got the South Fork of Ash Creek here, we've got the railroad here, basically everything. Oh, go to the next one, Karen. Can we just move back up? You'll see that a lot of stuff comes up right here. When we consider the developable properties, we're really looking at Brandy Meadows here. This is Liberty, this is built out. When we look at the amount of properties that would benefit from something at 7, it's really limited to a small number of properties. I'm looking at 3 right there. These are not in the city right now, they're still in the urban growth area. The big benefiter of this site, of any sort of improvement here, is this property, right? This has been somewhat developed over here. So it's like this that we're talking about. But I guess what I would like to sort of emphasize is this development is contributing to a larger proportion than 5.5% of the trips. What exactly that proportion is, I think, is subject to some additional number crunching. I'll say I looked at some of the numbers. Hey, Karen, can you just scroll up one more? I forgot I had this one in the packet. One more. So when we look, zoom in on it just one more time, please, Karen. No, zoom in. When we look at the total amount of the traffic at the intersection associated with this development, with Brandy Meadows 4, is 47% of the additional traffic between 2022 and 2027. Right? If we look at the proportion of the additional traffic heading northbound at the intersection from 2022 to 2027 is 77%. It seems to me if we're considering a rough nexus, a rough proportionality of the intersection improvement, saying this development is contributing to 47% of the additional traffic at the intersection. This improvement is required because of this development, therefore 47% of the intersection improvement is associated with this development, or potentially 77% is associated with it if we're looking at northbound traffic. I would say it's definitely more than 5%. What exactly that number should be for certain, I think is subject to additional discussion with the applicant, with you folks, all that sort of stuff. Based on all of that, again, while this discussion associated with traffic is a complex one, it's a difficult one, I mean, in very many ways, this is a very good development. It's primarily the traffic that makes this difficult to exactly nail down. But a number of the things that the city wants, including things like a mixture of housing types, things that the city wants and has stated as such, and things like its transportation system plan, the trail along the South Fork of Ash Creek, the very nice pedestrian and bicycle amenities. In many ways, this project addresses a number of the things that the city wants. It's primarily, and as such, I would recommend absolutely that this be approved subject to the 19 conditions. I think those two conditions 2 and 3 do need some work. I have some revised language before you. You'll note in condition 3, I said either 47% based on that number right there, or 77% based on that number. But if there's a different percentage that makes sense and can be justified by some sort of data, the city is potentially open to that as well. If there are any questions from my staff report, thank you all for listening. Whatever.
Commissioners have any questions of Fred?
I mean, do we,
Go
oh,
ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Do we have to sort of nail down that percentage today in tonight's hearing? Do you have the condition? I guess what's that look like?
I would encourage the applicant to provide any sort of data that they might have to provide a different number. We would want that number to be based on something in the record.
So Fred, I have a question too. Becky's question, does the intersection control evaluation that the applicant would get in revised condition 2, would that have current traffic data?
It's all based on the existing data, related years, and it's actually something that was suggested for information. Agencies that really want to say what the state wants here. They have to look at all the different alternatives, data section, to that in some cases they're around the house. When they are very, those are the solution. So, but they still are required to do that stuff. So that report has to be submitted in the critical.
but based on the data that currently exists.
Yeah, and you reviewed by ODOT based on trip generation, looked at from traffic businesses. They have to approve that analysis. But it doesn't meet ODOT's criteria for when it was taken and the inflation of traffic that was applied to it, if it doesn't follow their standards, then you have to get it out.
Thank you.
To follow up with that question, I really think we need new data. 2019 data is prior to almost all the homes south of me. And that area has been built out so much in the last 4.5 years. There is a great increase in traffic. And yes, we did a short study for the traffic report that we did a year ago. That doesn't show you what's going on on 7th Street and on 7th and G. It doesn't show you what's going on at 7th and F Street. And those are all intersections that need to have, I think, current data to make a good evaluation of how much traffic is really on that street. It has increased exponentially since we moved in 2018. And I understood that that place was going to be built out, but I also understood that Chestnut Street was going to go through to offer us an alternative. And right now, the only alternative is to go by our chair's house on F Street and Randall Way, and he doesn't like anybody speeding by his house. So I get that, and I don't like people speeding on 7th either. So I appreciate the city not wanting to move people off of parking on 7th Street. Those people have always parked on 7th Street, and just because there's an addition south of them, why do we have to disrupt their lives? But anyway, my main concern is that any traffic study really needs to have current data, because there has been such a change in what goes on 7th Street over the last 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, 2 years. And the other concern I'd like to point out, and I think just in conversations in the neighborhood, not specific to this, but people are concerned about the construction traffic. It's not just what will eventually be there. It's the double dump trucks that take up the middle of the road, and you have to stop and wait for them. And the concern is, what if there's a fire truck coming in or an ambulance coming in? We've got all of this huge construction equipment, plus all the workers' cars that go up and down, and they often have big trucks that they take up the middle of the road too. So it's not just what's going to happen after it's built, it's during the construction. There's a lot of concern about the safety of getting in and out when you only have one access point from G Street South to that entire area.
I can tell you that ODOT was part of the initial review, just traffic analysis, and also some of the intersections. So it followed their criteria.
I understand that. I'm just saying, I think there needs to be new data, because it doesn't include what's gone there in the last 5 years or even the last 2 years. That area has sprouted homes and cars like mushrooms. And without considering what's really going on, ODOT doesn't have a good idea of what's going on that street. The rest of the city doesn't have a good idea what's going on that street.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to the applicant. Spoken or written testimony will now be received from the applicant. State your name and address for the record. Please provide copies of written testimony, and please respond to direct questions from the hearing's body.
Good evening. I do have a PowerPoint presentation. I was crossing my fingers that whole time that it was going to work for me.
Hey, we're in business.
Good job, Karen.
All right, great. So I do have one handout in follow-up to a question from the previous round of discussion. I'll hand it out right now, but don't let it distract you too much until we get into the portion where we're talking about that 5.5 versus 47% question. So this table kind of breaks down the year-over-year trip impact as a percentage of all trips at the intersection of 7th and Monmouth.
Just so it's not distracting.
So good evening, my name is Zach Pels, I'm a land use planner with AKS Engineering and Forestry. Thanks very much for having us tonight. I'll try to be as brief as possible. There were a lot of really good piece of information from your staff during their presentation. I'll try to avoid as much as possible redundancy with your presentation. But I will try to put a little bit of a finer point on a few of those items that we're particularly interested in, notably transportation issues. So this, again, as Fred astutely pointed to, we're going to call it phases 5 through 9, and we're going to skip this number 4 business. That's a real thing. That's a county surveyor construct, but that's why that exists. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, the pointer works. Can you just tap the toner? Thanks, Karen. So, like I mentioned, I'm Zach Pels. I'm a planner with AKS Engineering, and we're representing the applicant, who is Brandy Group LLC. And we're joined tonight by a representative from Brandy Group, who is Larry Dahlke. A couple of other folks from AKS on the civil engineering team are with us tonight. Michael Poissant and Mark Auclair are here, and our traffic engineer is in the house as well. And so we're hopeful to be able to respond to any questions that you all have tonight. Was in your packet a letter from our legal counsel. Dana is not here tonight, but we'll try to do our best to answer any legal questions that you have. Next slide, please, Karen. Like I mentioned, we're going to gloss over some of this stuff. Fred did a really good job of covering kind of the site overview. I do want to say before we jump into it that we are very appreciative of your staff's time. Your staff was very generous with their time in helping us work through this. As your staff pointed out, they were appreciative of the application too, but that's largely because this is our 4th go round. So this is the 4th time we've done this. We know what the city expects. So we were, I think, very mutually happy to have that opportunity to kind of get to this point. And we think that we've got a good application in front of you. One thing I want to touch on a little bit more than your staff talked about was the Southwest Independence Concept Plan. I think our perspective on the need for an improvement at that intersection is slightly different. Not that we disagree with the approach or the lower priority for a signal at that intersection, but how we get to that signal and how we get to funding that signal. And I think that has to do with our arguments around what is an appropriate proportionate share in talking about the cost of improving the intersection. Your staff pointed out that we are suggesting revisions to conditions of approval number 2 and 3, but we also want to suggest one additional condition, and that's to condition 6B that was included in the Public Works memo. And that just has to do with the Parks and Recreation System Development Charge. Essentially, that condition says that we are not exempt from paying parks system development charges. As your staff pointed out, we have fully satisfied our obligation to either pay a fee in lieu or dedicate land for parks throughout all 9 phases of Brandy Meadows, and therefore we've satisfied that obligation, and we just want to make sure it's clear and on the record that we are exempt from further SDCs in that regard. And so I'm going to try to get through that as quickly as I can so I can save some time to answer any questions from you all. Next slide, please, Karen. Just to put into context, Brandy Meadows is in that lower yellow dot here. You can see City Hall sort of in the middle right on the screen. This just gives you kind of a orientation of where we're at relative to the City of Independence. Next slide, please, Karen. And then zooming in, you can see the site today. Next slide. In the context of some recent development nearby. And so those first three phases of Brandy Meadows are up at the north, and you can see Chestnut Street being extended just to the northwest corner of our site. You can see also that Ponderosa comes in from that Liberty Place subdivision at the east, and just kind of orienting you with where we're at in the world and what the site looks like. Pretty close to today. This isn't a current photo, but pretty close. Next slide, please, Karen. Zooming out, we talked a lot about traffic, and we're going to talk a lot more about traffic as we go through the night. And you can see really the main arteries in and out of this subdivision are 7th Street, Maple Avenue, 4th Street, E Street, F Street. But by and large, 7th Street is the most direct way in and out of here. And that's why our traffic analysis concluded that that's the intersection that meets the warrant for a signal before anything else. But I think this slide does also point to the fact that there are other alternatives in the neighborhood for getting in and out of here as well. Next slide, please, Karen. So really quickly, just here's an overview by the numbers, and you can see, I want to point out that, and Fred did this also in his presentation, but that sort of grayed out area of lots at the north are the first three phases of Brandy Meadows. Those have been approved by the city. They're under development right now. Those lots exist. Our site is shown in that colored area that kind of extends from the middle of the screen down to the south. And then this future phase that Fred was referring to as number 5 is this grayed out area to the south of our site. So if you look at it from the top to the bottom of that image, existing lots, the lots we're talking about today are the lots that are not grayed out. And then the lots below our site are future lots that we anticipate to be coming online soon, but no application has been submitted yet. So going to our site again, phases 5 through 9, it's about 26 total acres. It's zoned MX, which is a zoning designation that was designed by the city as part of the Southwest Concept Master Plan. And we've got roughly 4 to 5 phases. This 26-acre area is going to provide homes for 186 new families. And that's a lot of homes for families that need homes and independence. The unique thing about this site is that, I guess one thing that's really different from the prior 3 phases of Brandy Meadows is that there's a real mix of housing types in this subdivision relative to the prior ones. We've got 45 single-family detached homes, 29 duplexes, 23 townhomes, and 60 multifamily homes. And that's exactly consistent with the idea of the Southwest Concept Plan, in that providing a range of housing types like that really caters to a broader range of income and demographic groups. And that really is better able to serve young families, growing families, and elderly alike. And so we're very proud of the fact that we're able to do that. But one of the other reasons we have done that is to help meet this density target that was established in the MX zone, which sets a minimum density of 9 units per acre. So with the addition of these middle housing types and multifamily housing types, we're achieving that minimum density threshold, actually exceeding that minimum density threshold, as well as meeting those requirements for middle housing. Next slide, please, Karen. Karen, if you wouldn't mind just kind of clicking through, this just shows which lots are the single family lots, the yellow ones. You can click again. The brown ones are the duplex lots. The pink ones are the townhomes. And that orange one is the multifamily lot. Again, so a good mix of housing types to cater to a broad range of demographic groups spread throughout the site. Next slide, please, Karen. So not only are we providing a range of housing types for families, for new and existing families and independents that need them, but we're providing kind of the whole package of streets and other public improvements that go along with them, including the Chestnut Street extension. Karen, if you would mind just clicking through these two, it'll kind of show you where those are at. So Chestnut Street is at the top, 12th Street is the collector. On the west side of the screen, Mountain Fair Avenue, we're extending that. That's an arterial that'll be extended as part of this project. Fred talked about the extension of that Ash Creek Trail that connects in with the larger citywide trail network. You can see that at the top of the screen. And then just kind of to round it out, full package of local streets at the interior of the site, along with all the water lines and sewer lines and all that stuff. And so it's not just lots and it's not just impacts to facilities offsite, but we're really providing the complete package of public improvements on site. And many of those public improvements, like Chestnut Street, 12th Street, Mountain Fair Avenue, those are going to serve many more people beyond those that use this subdivision and well into the future. Next slide, please, Karen. So just real quickly, it's worth talking about the Southwest Concept Plan because that's sort of where this all originates. And it came up before, but in 2008 and 2009, the City of Independence identified a need to evaluate whether or not there was land within its existing urban growth boundary to accommodate population growth over the next 20 years. And as part of that effort, they determined that they needed 270 additional acres of land to accommodate the anticipated increase in homes that was expected to move to Independence, because of a lot of the natural resource constraints in that area, wetlands, floodplains, the city came up with this new zoning district called the MX district that allowed a pretty wide variety of housing types, including some commercial uses that would be located in that area. And that was to sort of help offset some of the land that could be lost to wetlands and floodplain like that, in the idea that those areas might develop at higher densities and other areas might develop at lower densities. But the goal, and which was later codified by the city zoning ordinance, was that all density must occur at 9 dwelling units per acre. And that's where that comes from. That UGB expansion was later sort of discussed in more detail throughout the Southwest Concept Master Plan in 2012. And that concept plan was still a pretty high level look at how services would be provided to homes and other uses in that 270 acre area. And so Fred showed you that slide earlier that showed kind of those broad strokes of streets going through that area. And that's sort of the outcome of the Southwest Concept Master Plan. The big point being that this is the area that the city has identified to accommodate all of its new population growth. It's all going into Southwest Independence. This is, I think, where we differ slightly from staff on the perspective of who is responsible for what portion of those improvements, but it's our part for sure in helping to pay for some of those improvements, but it's also the city's responsibility to help figure out how other of those improvements get made and how we partner with the city in making some of those bigger improvements. And this intersection at 7th and Monmouth is one of those intersections that, while not inside the Southwest Independence area, is certainly impacted and certainly used by residents in that area now and in the future. Next slide, please, Karen. The city's TSP was just updated in 2021, and I think Fred did a really good job, and even in his handout here, of talking about why the city opted to choose other improvements, kind of a network-wide solution of improvements. So what Fred means by that is that the city is looking to make better connections east and west throughout the city in Southwest Independence and in other areas outside of Southwest Independence in an effort to better move people throughout town without relying on a single roadway like 7th Street. So that was the city's approach. The problem with that approach is that the improvements that approach relies on, the Chestnut Street Bridge, Mountain Fir Extension, are extremely expensive. And the time that it's going to take for the city to get money to make those improvements is much longer than the time it's going to take for that intersection at 7th and Monmouth to fail. And so there's just kind of a timing problem with that approach. I respect staff's position on that approach. I think that is right. I think by diverting traffic away from Monmouth and by not prioritizing a signal that does a better job of moving traffic off of Monmouth, but that doesn't answer the question about the timing. And the city has known for a really long time that intersection is getting closer and closer and closer to failing. And so I think that's just part of the reason why we feel like this is a bigger citywide issue to help solve. So Fred went through these. The new TSP outlines the list of projects that the city is able to fund and would desire to fund if additional funds became available to improve that network connectivity and to serve future development in Southwest Independence. And those things include Chestnut Street Bridge, Mountain Fir Extension, and like I mentioned before, it does not include money for a signal at 7th and Monmouth. Next slide, please, Karen. And so applicant's attorneys submitted a letter to the record. The party that is interested in land for Brandy number 5, their attorneys submitted a letter outlining basically a couple of key points. One, the way that condition of approval number 3 is currently written does not meet constitutional requirements for proportionality. Essentially, the Fifth Amendment to the US Constitution says that you can't take private property, including private money, for an overwhelming public benefit without compensating a private party, right? And so that's what we're saying, and that's where this whole nexus and proportionality ruling and test comes out of these 2 federal Supreme Court cases that are widely known as Nolan and Dolan. Improvements must be related to the impact that is being generated by them, and the fee that an applicant is being assessed should be roughly proportionate to their impacts. The other bigger legal question, the other big legal question that's included in that letter from the applicant's attorney has to do with a relatively new state law that really tries to limit the amount of discretion cities have when reviewing and approving applications for housing. So in about 2019, in direct response to the problem of affordable housing across the state, and it's been rising ever since, the state decided that they were going to really clamp down on any discretionary rules that applied to housing applications. And so they put this provision in Oregon state law that said cities may not make any decisions regarding housing applications that are subjective. They have to be clear and objective. And beyond that, they can't result in unreasonable cost or delay. And so we think that this condition definitely results in an unreasonable cost, because we think that full cost of that intersection, staff has now acknowledged that they're willing to work with us on that, and we're happy to hear that. But we think that as written in your packet, that condition is unreasonable in terms of cost and in terms of delay. And the delay part has to do with the amount of time it takes to prepare this intersection evaluation. So this intersection at 7th Street in Monmouth is actually controlled by ODOT. And before any improvement can be made, ODOT requires this evaluation called an intersection control evaluation. It takes approximately six months to a year to complete. But it's also possible that recommended improvement that comes out of that study will require some acquisition of property around the corners of that intersection, just given the current geometry of that intersection and the likelihood that we may need another turn lane, or if it's a roundabout, even more space. There are going to be some conversations with those neighboring property owners about purchasing land for those future improvements, and those conversations typically take a long time. And so that's the reason why that's kind of the big part of the reason why we think that results in some additional cost and unreasonable delay to our application. I already talked about this condition 6B, so I'll skip that. The one condition we haven't talked about yet is the timing for this intersection control evaluation. So we're essentially suggesting revisions to 3 conditions, and condition number 2 just has to do with the timing for when we complete this intersection control evaluation. Applicant is fully on board with paying the full freight for that evaluation. We understand that we do impact that intersection. We understand that it's necessary to get moving on that evaluation soon, and that we know it's going to take the city likely more time than we would like to get moving on that. And so while we've just been arguing about all these proportionality issues and we think they apply to this study, we are willing to fully fund the cost of that evaluation so we can get going on it right now. We would just like to ask that condition be revised so that it doesn't have to be completed until phase 6A plats. And that gives us time to move forward with phase 5 and phase 6 and build homes in phase 6 while that intersection control evaluation is still ongoing. Again, it can take up to a year or potentially more. We just want to make sure that in the event that runs into delays, there is time to do that. On top of that, that study is legally not required until the signal warrant is met, which is in phase 6A also. So that's a kind of a logical place to insert that requirement. We've talked about condition of approval number 3. Our request is just that be changed to pay the city a fee in lieu of 5.5%, and that 5.5% is identified in that table that I handed you, and we can talk about that in a minute. That really comes from the share of our trips, all of our trips through phases 5 through phase 9, relative to all the trips that will occur at that intersection in 2027. That's a very normal way to consider rough proportionality in the context of those types of intersections. In fact, making that improvement at that intersection will significantly increase the capacity of that intersection. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways to sort of slice it. You know, we are using the numbers at our full build out without the intersection being improved, relative to the trips that are there today. You know, an improvement at that intersection will be designed to accommodate traffic for the next 20 years. So the traffic 20 years from now is going to be much higher. We could base it on that as well. We think 5.5% is the right number, given all of our trips relative to the total traffic that's there today, and especially in recognition of the larger region-wide impact that intersection realizes. Again, this whether intended or not, this is sort of an intersection that's used citywide and does really accommodate traffic in this part of Independence. So yeah, I guess the change to condition 3 is just that we're requesting to pay a fee that's 5.5% of the future improvement at that intersection. Alternatively, you know, staff made the comment that, you know, their preference would be to make improvements elsewhere. A fee in lieu is very helpful in that regard too. If the city has identified funds for a Chestnut Street Bridge in 2 years, and they can build a Chestnut Street Bridge within the time needed, or a similar time frame as getting a signal installed, they can use that fee in lieu to make the improvements on Chestnut Street or some other improvement that might be more consistent with their goals for a more connected network. And so for all those reasons, we think the fee in lieu is the right approach. Next slide, please, Karen. So I went through these in detail. Next slide, please, Karen. Again, condition 3, we talked about this. I don't think there's anything else. I think the one other thing I'd like to just hit on with this condition of approval number 3, it just, you know, requires either a roundabout or a signal. It's possible that intersection control evaluation could require something else. And so it's possible that ODOT may not even support the condition that we come up with. That's another reason why we don't like it. Finally, you know, putting a large burden for this improvement, whether it's 100%, whether it's 47%, makes it very unlikely that our client, future development in the Southwest area, does not move forward. Because at the end of the day, developers have to be able to make some revenue off these projects so they can go to the next project and provide more housing in Independence, right? That's how it works. I mean, our clients provide the housing that the city demands and the city expects to need over the course of those next decade or two. And it's kind of us working in partnership with the city, making sure that those improvements can happen in a way that's equitable. So truthfully speaking, it's important that we get that proportion right so that we can move forward in a way that makes sense. And so that the city can continue to advance the ball on making improvements to their transportation system-wide. Yeah, so we talked about this condition 6B. Just to be clear, we've paid those fees or we've dedicated the land already. The way the condition is written, it just says that we are not exempt from paying Parks SDCs. We'd like that just to be written to say we are exempt, just to fully acknowledge that we've already paid those fees or dedicated that land. Next slide, please, Karen. So there were a couple of public comments. Fred touched on these. I won't go in too much detail on them. It's just I have probably some graphics that help show this a little bit better than Fred did. So I'll take this time to do that. These public comments were really good. very thoughtful. The comment from Ruby Osborne just says there's a need for alternative access on 7th. We agree with that. We'll talk in a minute about how the city's TSP addresses that. And there were some other comments from Gary and Joanne Stutzman that talked about kind of problems with 7th Street, but also went on to more detail about the timing of the Chestnut Street Bridge, Mountain Fir extension, whether or not a traffic study was completed. Next slide, please, Karen. So by and large, the TSP addresses all of these comments, and this image that you're looking at on the right is a map of the approved roadway plan projects in the city's TSP, and they're a little bit tough to see, but those green dash lines are kind of the local and collector street improvements, and then that orange dash line is the Mountain Fir, which is an arterial extension. The blue line up on Monmouth is a two-way left turn lane improvement. So Karen, if you could click just one time, I'll walk through kind of how these improvements that are planned in the city's TSP directly respond to these comments. So there's a comment that we need more alternatives to 7th Street. And again, we've talked about this quite a bit tonight, but there are several projects identified in the TSP that do relate to alternatives to using 7th Street and provide a larger east-west connection. Some of those projects are not on the fiscally constrained plan. Some of those plans are on the larger wish list, but those are all projects that are identified in the city's TSP to help improve that network connectivity, including the Chestnut Street Bridge. Karen, if you want to click one more time, which we've been talking about quite a bit tonight. The Mountain Fir extension, if you want to click one more time. And again, those are all all those comments are addressed by the city's TSP. So we did include a traffic study. We've talked a lot about that tonight. Your staff mentioned that impacts to school aren't germane to the city's decision. That's correct. But one thing that is germane to the city's decision is off-street parking, and we do satisfy that criterion. We meet all the minimum requirements for off-street parking. So that kind of rounds out our response to the public comments, and I think that's sort of the end. I guess one other final thing, just in closing, we always say this, our application does meet all the applicable criteria, and as your chair pointed out during his long script tonight, the decision tonight needs to be based on those applicable approval criteria. As your staff pointed out, and as we've shown you tonight, we do meet all those criteria. Again, the project provides a real need, real benefit to the city, provides needed housing. We think it's a great project for existing and future residents. We do have a few suggested revisions to those conditions of approval that we've talked about. And we think that, again, with the tweak to that condition of approval 3 and allowing a fee in lieu, it helps us kind of advance the ball more on making improvements to the transportation network than anything else. And I think with that, I'll open it up to questions.
I just had a question. Brandy Meadows phases 2, 3, 4, that was your group also?
1, 2, and 3. Yep.
1, 2, and 3?
Yep.
So that contributed to the traffic that's going up 7th Street?
Yeah.
It's not just this new addition or what might come in the future?
Yeah, correct. So thank you for asking that. One thing I wanted to mention is that those first 3 phases have paid transportation system development charges for every new home that was built in those phases, right? And those system development charges, again, are to be used for capacity enhancing improvements like a signal at 7th or other things on the city's TSP and capital improvements plan. So while those first 3 phases did not make an improvement at 7th and Monmouth, they certainly paid a large chunk of money in terms of system development charges to the city for transportation capacity enhancing projects.
Thank you. I guess I would make my point again, that if you do a new study, I would really like to see data that's current. And I know school's getting out and you're going to miss the traffic of parents taking kids to school and back from school.
Sure.
Unless you wait until September to do it. But I really think you need to do countings 24 hours a day over a period of time to get an accurate look at what traffic is at 7th and G at 7th, and F at 7th and Monmouth.
I'm gonna actually turn it over to Jennifer Danziger. She's our transportation engineer. She'll be able to kind of talk about how we come up with an appropriate base year and what other background conditions go into it. Jennifer, I think it'd be helpful if you don't mind just spending a couple minutes. One thing I want to say before I hand it over to Jennifer, though, is that in addition to the SDCs that we paid, just general SDCs, those first three phases of Brandy Meadows also paid a per acre fee towards a future Chestnut Street Bridge, and that was kind of the first of its kind in the city. It was sort of a supplemental SDC that the city had applied to those three phases and that the city has to use when that bridge comes around.
It would be nice.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Danziger. I'm the traffic engineer for this project. I work for Lancaster Mobley. I did want to talk a little bit about the traffic numbers and the way traffic analysis works. So we did collect our data in 2022, and in fact, we had to delay the study until September in order to collect traffic while school was in session. So that was something that was really important to the city and to
So
ODOT.
how long was your time period for collecting?
We collect for a day, and we look at 2 hours in the morning, the worst 2 hours of the morning and the worst 2 hours of the afternoon.
So that
because
doesn't catch the people coming home from school
So-
necessarily.
the performance thresholds are all based on 1 hour time periods. And if we look at the worst hours of the day, we're essentially capturing how those things operate over the worst time period. So a daily number, it produces a bigger number, but it doesn't actually better inform the process from a traffic impact study level. And
But it doesn't count my trips up and down 7th because I don't go at those times.
right, and the reason you don't is because those times are really busy and you choose to go at
But
those.
it does have more traffic during.
It
the
does,
week.
and that's not to say, so we list the daily number, we talk about the number of daily trips that are getting added, but we don't look at every hour when we analyze our operations. We look at the 2 worst hours of the day, the worst hour in the morning. So if you are coming out of here and you come up 7th and you hit Monmouth, what does that look like? It's the worst hour of the day. And then the same thing in the evening. If you're returning home or you're coming out, what's that worst hour? And in fact, we actually look at the worst 15 minutes in that hour. So it's it's the worst condition that's evaluated. So just to kind of touch on what those numbers and the numbers in the study comprise. So we collected the 2022 numbers. We look at this morning peak, this afternoon peak. When we looked at the signal warrants, we took the 2019 data just to see, because they collected 16 hours of data, or 14 or 16, how that traffic spread over the day. And then we looked at our 2022 numbers and said, okay, let's take the higher volume that we counted in 2022 and do the same thing, proportionately spread it. So every single hour that we used in our signal warrant analysis proportionately higher. So we never used the 2019 numbers. We just used them to inform what the rest of the day might look like. When we look to the future, there's stuff that's been approved. I think there was 5 projects that we included that were improved, including the confusing number 5. So we looked at, Brandy Meadows 2, 3, and 4. They weren't built. So we estimated how much traffic was being added by that. There's a couple of other, like Liberty Meadows. There were 3 or 4 other projects that we specifically went and said, and I don't think most of them had studies. So we specifically went and said, what was being built, how much traffic was it, and we added that traffic in. So when we talk about our background traffic, we're talking about what's out there today, what's been approved for development, and we also add this general growth for infill, for other things that are happening in other places that might pass through. So we also add a growth per year to that, growth rate is 2% per year that we're adding to everything as well. So that background traffic volume includes a lot of other things. With regard to 4 versus 5, or phases 5 through 9 versus this other project, they were being talked about kind of at the same time that we were looking at the study. And the concern that came up as we were scoping and trying to figure out what needed to be done was, well, if you only look at one and not the other, and each one only looks at the one and not the other because it's not approved, then you're not capturing the full compounded effect of these 2 developments that might come in close together. And so at that time, we considered each of them cross purposes as we were looking at things. So we included that other one in our background so we could see how the combined traffic would affect things while still doing separate studies. So it was kind of a complex thing. And then later on, we were asked and we provided some additional numbers that pulled that out and just looked at what things were going on if only the things that had been approved were accounted for. And that's where you were talking about, we're close, 7th Street and Monmouth, it's close in the background. It's just not quite there. The addition of this project is what kind of tips it over at that level is. And that's not to say, you know, if you ask people in the audience, they might say there's too much delay there already. You might say there's too much delay there already. It's congested. And so we're at that threshold where something's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. But how do you, when that happens, how do you pay for a project? How do you say what's fair with all the things that have been slowly contributing? And they have been paying fees and that kind of thing, but you know, do you tag it with one project? Do you look at other things? Or again, as Zach's talked about, constructing a traffic signal on a state highway is a complex and slow process. And so the timing of all of that is also a critical thing. It's just difficult to get something on a city street. We might be able to get a signal in a year or a year and a half. It's very difficult to get a signal in a year and a half on a state highway.
So my question, when I read that and knew that it was going to take a lot of time, if ODOT's asking you to do an ICE or whatever,
Right.
you're going to build that out, but we won't have a traffic signal there.
You know, I'm not going.
I know, but
There's a
that's-
lot of discussion about how do you deal with the timing of that,
And
and
that's a concern that
Right.
I would raise, is because if you go ahead and build it out, but we still don't have a traffic signal there, everybody is impacted, not just the new houses, but everybody that lives there and everybody that
Right.
travels there for.
and you may see people shift to alternative
There-
routes.
Yeah,
in
well,
the
we can
process.
go, there's really not a lot. If you want to go south, you can go G Street to Corvallis Highway.
Yep.
If you want to go west, I guess you could go west on F Street and kind of curve around and go too fast in
Right.
front of Corby's house. But then you have to turn and either go back out to Monmouth on
Right.
13th or go up and wind around the Central Plaza to get the
Mhm.
light at Gun Club.
Right.
Those are not very good alternatives.
Right, I mean, there's a lot of traffic destined for Monmouth Street, and you know, right now, 7th Street, if you look at it, it's the most direct route. And, you know, that's why, you know, as we look at things, and we've kind of said, what are the routes that make the most sense, and thus what's the consequences of that, and that's where this signal has come up. You know, it is a complicated thing with the timing and the requirements of it in terms of construction, and I'm not the one that has to decide the order of things. I provide the information that helps everyone else sort of make the decisions on how they want to move forward with those things. As Zach said, the ICE, we actually have to look at a signal and a roundabout. We have to get through the approval process where the local region recommends it to the state traffic engineer, who would then approve the project. And they may say, it can't just be a signal, you have to rebuild the sidewalks, you gotta put bike lanes on the highway. Even without what's on, you know, it can get very, very wrapped up and change into a bigger project. So weighing whether you want the development to happen, or it can legally happen, or if you have to accept that there's going to be a level of congestion until these other elements start to do, and take that money and potentially look at, can you provide some alternate improvements more efficiently? That might be a solution that's out there as well. Are there any other questions about traffic and the traffic analysis? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have any more questions for Zach?
I had one, and I don't know if it's the time to bring it up, but on looking at your map, that was the last page in, I think, attachment C, and you show the path that's in the green zone, but it doesn't come back down to your nice new wide pathway along Chestnut Street. Why doesn't your path come on down? It was this map, I don't know. You show your path there, but it doesn't loop down to this real nice new pathway you're making on Chestnut, which would be really nice for the people who walk on Chestnut or the people who are coming from other areas. It's the last page in C.
Is this okay?
Because we've had all this talk about having our pathways connected, and I just would like to see it connected to the improvements you're making on Chestnut.
Here's how that looks. I'm gonna just rip this up, and let's pass it around. So here's what you're talking about. Here's Chestnut,
Mhm.
here's the Ash Creek path,
Uh-huh.
there's a portion we're building. It's gonna run around the north side of this
Right,
pond.
uh-huh.
There is a connection here
There
through
is.
Chestnut.
There
There's
is.
also a temporary connection here through the Chestnut, but the reason this isn't a permanent connection is because this will continue to wrap around,
Right.
right?
So you already are doing that. When will this part get built so that it connects?
Yeah, that will be built, that is approved as part of the phase
Right,
3 that's currently
right.
under construction.
Okay, and so you'll put this in with this new one? Okay, that answers that question. Thank you very much. Did you guys want to say?
The revised, proposed revisions, the conditions that you see, applicants seen those, or you guys seen those, relative to what we
We just received those today.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so we, with the, I guess,
I'd be curious.
I mean, I guess, it's kind of wide open still. It says basically 47% or 79%, I think is what. Again, I don't, so what, and thanks for bringing that up. I think we really disagree, I guess, with that sort of proportionality analysis. That analysis doesn't account for any of the trips there today. It basically just says that your proportionate share is relative to only new trips going forward from 2022 to 2027, right? And that's why that number is so much higher. So yes, of course, our share would be higher if you're only considering only new trips that will have occurred from 2022 through 2027 and not including any of the existing trips at the intersection. I don't think that that's consistent with the intent of the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution in that, it's the government's obligation to compensate private individuals justly for their for the taking of their land or money. So I think that's a stretch, to be honest. And I think, again, a more fair analysis is similar to the one that we've got, where it takes a snapshot of all of the trips at the intersection as we believe it will be in 2027. So without adding capacity, but including all of the trips through our phases 5 through 9, and then assuming that our trips are a proportionate share of all of those trips. I think that's a more fair way to do it. It's more consistent with what the intent of those proportionality requirements are.
Any other questions, Zach? Thank you, Zach. At this time, I'm going to adjourn the meeting for a 10-minute recess. Everybody can stretch your legs.
Back. People don't.
I don't recognize you in driving one of the cars that's going 45 or 50.
Yeah.
No, it's,
Are you out on the lawn?
I know that one of the counselors said, well, nobody's gonna build with garages, but I'm thinking, he can
well, it's, luckily, we don't have kids on our road, except for my neighbors. Okay, I'll go ahead and call the meeting. We're about ready to start again.
Okay, thank you.
All the traffic though.
Puff it up a little.
What they really need to do is put a bridge in.
Okay, I'll go ahead and call the meeting back to order at 21 minutes after 8. So we'll resume, we'll start with testimony from those in favor of the application. And the first one, Larry Dahlke. Remember to state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, Larry Dahlke, Salem, Oregon, 3900 Eola Drive. And anyways, I'm listening to all this stuff, and I've got several notes in several different locations here. So, but first of all, I'd like to say, am I too loud?
No.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to say I listened to all this, and all the requirements and everything, and I've been over here working on the development for now 4 years with Chet back here, Graham, who's the realtor, and my brother-in-law. And we came into town wanting to build a quality neighborhood. And we listened to, when we bought or started buying and have continuation of buying the property, of the guidelines that were set forth years ago, 12 years ago or 10 years ago, of what the requirements were and what we were trying to, shoot for. Well, one of the things that I have seen and happen in the last 3 years is affordability. And in order to continue a quality development for your local people, we've done our best to keep our costs down, keep the houses affordable, but things, SDCs, requirements of going down here and building a signal, all this chases your developer away. I'm here, I've spent already a lot of money trying to get to this point, and I've listened to what the city wants, and we've abided by many of what we've gone to higher density for our portion of land. We've we've paid a tremendous amount for the bridge tax, because we've talked about the bridge going over, and I think that's a focus that we ought to all be thinking about, because I think that's a solution to this whole thing. And I understand there may be some state or federal money out there that could be continually worked on while we do maybe a couple more phases and we get there. But to put a burden on the development, it may sound like, well, they can afford it, the developer, but it gets passed on to your local people. We've got a good quality group of people out there. I don't know how many of you have been out there and seen the subdivision and what we're trying to do to the City of Independence. We're trying to create tax dollars, and actually it's been enjoyable the first 3 phases. We had some rocky roads, but once again, we've adjusted to listen to the city's needs and try to address them. And the concern about safety and construction, I listened to that, and that's nothing you can do as far as stopping construction traffic. I wish I could say we could find another route, but we can also talk to the suppliers about safety and slowing down, and that's all we can do at that point, and try to make sure that we're safe. But also we've dedicated land, parks land. We're trying to do trails. Let's see, I got a list of things. that we've, I don't want to miss, we've adapted. We've been told things like the storm detention. I was told that we went in and worked with the engineers in the past and have told we've got the detention goes here, a little bit over here we'll have to work on, but all that has changed too. So we've adapted to that. So we're trying to do adjust to losing more lots too, and that's what's that hurts too, so we calculate all that to figure out can we make money or is it profitable? But then we're faced with a pretty serious economy coming up that's challenging. We're sitting on probably on phase 3, half the lots haven't been paid for, but we're getting close and they're selling, they're moving along, and people are coming in and really enjoying and liking it. So again, I see the quality that our builders are giving us and what we're trying to do. So let's see, there's a couple other things. Yeah, I've seen our costs, from when we first started out, the cost of the lots were about 80,000, 85, and we sold the last ones at 130. And again, the profit margins, because of the cost of materials and everything else and the development, it just keeps going up and up and up. So I'm not sure what it'll be in the future, whether it's going to hit 150 to be profit or 160, but that's absurd amount of money for a lot anymore. And I know that too. I can't believe what things are costing. So let's see. I wanted to touch bases on a couple other things. Yeah, we're trying to do the bike trails and all that and make it right. And again, I think a lot of this stuff we're talking about, there's some responsibility from the City of Independence that needs to contribute. We're part of a team. We feel like we're a good team, and we brought good players in. AKS, they've worked well with me and the city. We've had many city meetings trying to adjust all this stuff so that when we come to planning, we're all in agreement. But the traffic signal, and that could be the killer of this project. And I think in your long-range planning, you all want to see a nice development continue, and that's what I hope to provide. And anyways, thank you for your time. That's about all I got to say.
Any questions for Mr. Dalkey? All right, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Harvey Cummings?
Chair Chappelle, Commissioners, my name's Harvey Cummings, 16240 Southeast Bel Air Drive, Damascus, Oregon, 97089. I'm speaking in support of this application tonight. The applicant has met all the conditions that are required in the MX zone. He's went above and beyond. It was a difficult zone. And because he's met all of the conditions, I think it's necessary to approve this application tonight. I'm having kind of an issue with the 2 and 3, the same traffic thing, because that's such a big piece to this project. It's kind of the make it or break it point, and that's why it's getting so much attention on both sides. And I know that we can, well, the bottom line is there needs to be an intersection light put in up on 7th and Monument. I mean, ultimately, that's where it needs to get to solve the problems in the neighborhood. And moving this subdivision along is going to help get towards a solution to what we know is an existing problem. And how do we get there? We could do transportation studies till we're blue in the face. I mean, we're going to get one analysis from the city looking at it, we're going to get one from the developer looking at it, and we're going to end up in 2 different spots no matter how long or how much delay we do to get to solving this problem ultimately down the road. Both parties have responsibility here, and I think it's a little excessive on the city's behalf to put the full responsibility of it on the developer. The city has some responsibilities. There's been transportation portion of SDCs received from the city, from previous developments, from Liberty development across the street. And so there's a lot of traffic going into this intersection. And a traffic improvement on this intersection is going to help everyone in the city, not just this development, which is kind of the city's analysis of, we're looking at a percentage of just what you're putting to it, but they're saying, here, fix the problem for everybody and just a little bit of traffic you're putting to it. So I think fairly that the analysis of AKS on this is probably, I don't want to say more fair, but it really is. It's what, they're paying their portion. In addition to that, they're paying SDCs on top of that that goes towards transportation. So, this approach is putting too much on the developer and almost breaking the back of this thing. I think that the fee contribution to the intersection is a good option in the sense that when the analysis goes into that intersection, there may be a better place to put those funds, but that allows the city to make some decisions. Because really putting this an entire intersection that's a mile away from this developer or development on this developer, it's excessive, I think. I think that the government has some responsibility here to pitch in on this. I think you're the commission that's here to oversee this. And quite honestly, I think that what's being asked for is a little bit of government overreach, on this. They're looking too much to the developer, and I kind of hope you'll see that. And, I'd like to see approval of this, and I'd like that condition on number 3 to be discussed amongst yourselves. There's a fair point in here, but I really think that the analysis from AKS is probably the correct way. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, now we'll move on to testimony from those who are neutral towards the application. And we have Bill Henley.
Hi, my name's Bill Henley. I live at 1094 Chestnut Street, so we're in phase 2, I guess, I think that was. And the punching through for this on 11th is going to be right across the street from us, so take an interest in what's going on down there. It's going to be a lot of development. I say I'm neutral, not because I don't want the development to go in, but I didn't know that was something I was supposed to decide on tonight if I'm for it or against it. I just wanted to make some comments, so I'm going to do that. Maybe too late to change anything at this point, but just let you know. I am strongly in favor of any new development this day and age to have as much green space as possible. And I think this, the first thing I saw when I looked at that map is this is going to be, I told Fred this, there's going to be a concrete jungle with these tiny lots. Basically, you have a house and a driveway and a sidewalk and hardly anything green. So I would love to see the city figure out a way to make it possible for the developer to say, set aside every 1 out of 20 or something like that, lots for just a green space, a public green space with native plants or something. It makes it more ecologically sustainable, and it makes it a lot nicer to live in than just having house after house after house for block after block like it is currently. And it's going to get worse because it looks like most of the new lots are smaller than even the postage stamp I live on. That's a major concern of mine. As far as the traffic, I see a much better solution than just putting a traffic light in at 7th. It seems a lot safer and a lot more logical to get something connected through out of the south side. So either Chestnut, go all the way over to 16th. I'm assuming that's where it was going to go. You say you put a bridge, well, bridge to where? Hopefully not a bridge to nowhere. It's got to go through somewhere. If you get that through to 16th or Mountain Fir down to wherever, 16th or Stapleton or something like that, some way for people to get out, that would take a lot of traffic off of Monmouth Street. And even if you're going over to Monmouth, which we do often, my son lives over there, if we could get over to 16th and go up and have a traffic light, and we would bypass the high school that way too, which is just a mess every afternoon. And if we're going down to Corvallis or down to the coast, you can get out to 16th, go south, take Stapleton, you're on 99, and you don't have to contribute to traffic in town. So it seems like that would be a much better solution than saying, how do we funnel even more traffic up 7th? And if you think, if you're somebody that lives on 7th between G and southward from there, all the traffic's going through there before there's any way to get out off of 7th. So I wouldn't be happy if I were living on that stretch there. Let's see, what else? Just a general observation, I live on that one short stretch of a couple of blocks of Chestnut that currently exists that have bike lanes on both sides and supposedly no street parking. I have a driveway that's barely a car long. Many of these new houses are similar. A lot of them have big pickup trucks or SUVs that are hanging over the sidewalk anyway, and many people are parking in the street because either they don't park in their garage or the car won't fit in the driveway. And if we have company over, I can only fit 2 cars in my driveway, barely. And, you know, if you have 3 people over with vehicles, they got to park somewhere. There's no place to park other than way down the block or something like that. So, you know, I don't know what the solution to that is, but just hope you take that into account in what's required for street parking in any of the new development part. And let's see what else. I think some of my other questions were answered already. Just a general question, maybe you guys can tell me right now, or the developer, what's the proposed timeline? I mean, assuming this gets approved in some form, when is ground going to be broken for phase 5? Are we talking this year, 2 years from now? Anybody know?
Provided before we were possibly this summer.
Oh, okay.
July or August.
And what would it be, maybe 2-3 years to go 5 through 9 or more?
We're just gonna
Keep going?
plan is to do 40 lots. That's
Okay.
what we're looking at it this next up at 47, 43 lots.
So couple of years to finish that, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay,
A year.
okay, yeah, I was just curious. Okay. I don't think I missed anything critical, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Henley. Okay, Mr. J.
Commissioners, staff, my name is Jonathan Jay. I live at 820 Maple Street in Independence. I am a member of the Independence Park and Rec Board. I am very interested in more detail of the complexion, the usability of the green space that is being offered. I've been over in that area. I wonder how much of what was presented as acreage is actually part of the riparian easement that the state has. How much of it is wetlands area that won't be usable during part of the year, maybe half the year, depending on the rainfall. I'd like to have more detail on how much acreage will be available for actually development by the city for usable park space, playground area, play fields. It's not that far from the rest of, from Sunset Meadows Park. But now Sunset Meadows Park hasn't been developed for quite a while. So, I'm just curious, more detail about what's available.
Okay. Is that something you can address that, Fred?
I mean, I'm not gonna be able to address it, completely. A lot of that stuff, I think, is on my computer. Let me try and get to what I can get to. The staff report.
I guess my concern is I just don't want to have an offer of green space and then find out later that 80% of it's unusable for half the year.
Right, so it's not, I mean, so currently, what is there is, I mean, it's some of it was dedicated as part of phases 2 through 4. That, we specifically requested that at that point because we look at things like our Parks and Open Space Master Plan and see what it calls for. And our Parks and Open Space Master Plan calls for a trail in the area. It also calls for exactly that image of the Parks and Open Space concept for the Southwest Concept Plan. So basically, we looked at adopted documents that said, based on what our plans call for, this is consistent. Now, we don't specifically have criteria in there about usability per se. What it says specifically is, it's on page 37 of your folks' packet. It says, the applicant shall dedicate to the city a tract of land within or adjacent to the proposed subdivision not less than 6.25% of the gross area of said subdivision for public park and recreation purposes. Any tract of land shall be approved by the city as being suitable and adaptable for park and recreation uses. So those are the key words in that phrase, suitable and adaptable for parks and recreation uses. When we look at the one image, and I don't got my pointer, can you pull up that other thing real quick, Karen? That other document. When we look at what constitutes things like parks and recreation purposes, some of the things that I consider are, can you walk on it? Could you throw a playground on it if you wanted? Not that one, go further down. Right there, and can you zoom in on that just a little bit more? This is something that the applicant provided, just sort of depicting how the open space area would be. Now, a lot of it is riparian area. Some of it is within the floodplain, especially as you go north, but there will be a trail there to recreate along the trail. And you can see the acreages there. It will be a fairly large park and open space area. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm gonna try and grab it. It says winter.
Chestnut.
So this is Chestnut, yeah, so north is to the side, which makes it confusing. This is going north right here. This is the townhouses and Brandy Meadows 4 right there. This is the riparian habitat, which does contain a number of oak trees that they did preserve as part of phases 2 through 4. There is a trail right here, and yes, indeed, this trail, as it continues north, we anticipate that trail will connect to Inspiration Garden.
So is the line that's going just to the north of that area, is that Ash Creek?
This is Ash Creek right here. And so you can access Ash Creek, and especially on this portion of it, you can get down to Bank Edge.
There's a little bit of area that's on the west side of Ash Creek, that's inaccessible And I say, not much, but I guess my question, you mentioned that it was presented as part of phase 2 and 3. Wasn't it rejected as a portion of green space at that point?
No, we, as part of phases 2 and 3, we specifically accepted that especially area as part of the parks and open space system because it is supported by the Southwest Concept Plan.
What I'm saying, a large part of it is a catch basin area. A large part of it is.
This is the catch basin
Okay.
area, the stormwater pond area.
You
And
can't
you'll
put a
see
soccer
what this
field there.
image is attempting to show is that this fencing can be oriented in such a way to maximize the usability of this space. The exact location of where this fence is gonna be, where we're gonna finalize as part of the civil design. But we do think that this approach makes good sense.
Designate what portion of that is part of the wetlands area? What portion of that green area is wetlands?
Is wetlands?
I mean, what I'm talking about, we live right at the south end of Inspiration Gardens. We have a path that goes down by Ash Creek that's usable during the summer. It's not usable from October through April because it gets flooded. So it's not really usable space except for 8 months of the year. So that's what I'm asking.
Right, and that's exactly the intent of this, and you'll see too, that's the intent specifically of this portion of that right there. And you'll see that that is specifically, when we look at what the diagram for what the Southwest Independence Concept Plan called for, that's literally exactly what the plan called for.
I guess my other question is, how much population increase is required before additional green space is required? Another pocket park like Sunset Meadows Park, it goes through. Since we've been there, they've tripled the area that was built of houses, and they built Sunset Meadows for that initial phase. Now you have 3 times more. Where are the other pocket parks or other green space like the previous gentleman asked? That's all.
So, I mean, just with
Part of the park plan.
which, yes, yes, absolutely. And so, I mean, the parks plan identifies how parks should be provided and sort of what types of parks are anticipated where and where there's a deficiency of parks and all of this sort of stuff. What the benefit of things like the Southwest Concept Plan provide is it articulates rather than, because how the condition reads is it says an applicant may dedicate 6.25% of the land. Well, another applicant might come in and say, okay, well, here's 6.25% and it might be a junk piece of property. In this case, we could actually point to an adopted plan that articulated a vision for what this riparian corridor could be. We could say, rather than doing 6.25% on this lot and that lot and this lot and that lot, we want you to provide that 6.25% in this area and make it a very high quality amenity for the neighborhood. And that's what this is going to be. This, I mean, when you total this is more than 5 acres right here. From what I anticipate, what I believe is significantly larger than Sunset Meadows Park.
Oh, yes. Those are my concerns. Well, some of Ash Creek goes through your green area, so that has to be riparian lease.
Yeah, and there is wetland down, obviously, that banks of Ash Creek.
Just a concern for the commission.
Thanks, Mr. J.
Can I follow that up? I'm just here, I'm having trouble envisioning where that section of the path would connect where you are. Would that go north of the currently constructed road?
Yes, it would. So can you flip up just one more, maybe a couple more? One more. So just do one more, Karen. So on this, it's easiest to see, because this is a subject property right here. You can see this green space here in the Southwest Concept Plan is envisioned as sort of the key green space for this area. This portion where we're talking about is roughly right here, where the stormwater pond would be, and then a trail would continue up past this and to the property to the north, and eventually connect up here in Inspiration Garden. That's the idea. There's one property between this and this. Or it's going to be developed at a certain point, and we'll have a similar sort of requirement at that point.
Does that mean you'll use the old trestle as a bridge over the creek?
Wouldn't that be awesome?
It would, before
That-
it's
I
all
think
taken
that-
apart by the kids.
I think that I would absolutely love that. I love that old trestle back there, but I've never been on that property, just for the record. I mean, I really do think it is really nice back there, and I think that would be a spectacular amenity for this whole system. Yes.
I had a question, looking at this map, around the intersection there between 13th and I think it must have to be Chestnut. You have the big green square. What's that big green square?
There was anticipated to be a larger park somewhere towards the center of this. This is a larger recreation amenity.
That'd be like Madrona Park or something where you could have soccer fields and things?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what's called for. I don't think it's a particularly large facility, but it is a larger park facility.
Because it would be nice to have a place for all the kids to play. You can't play in Inspiration Garden. You can't play on a riparian trail. And now that they've contoured Sunset Park, Meadows Park, you can't really do soccer in there because it goes up and down. So it'd be nice if there was a park in someplace in here where you could do that.
All right, we'll move on to testimony from those opposed to the application. Andrew Rocker.
My name is Walker. I live at 1429 South 10th in Brandy Meadows. Lived there for about 2.5 years. I kind of apologize. I thought in filling out the form to speak with you, there was only a binary choice for or against. I didn't actually realize there was a neutral, which really probably better describes my feelings about the project. I'm certainly not against it. We had the good fortune of having our home built by the Dalkeys, so I work very closely with them, and I know them to be excellent quality in their work and ethical and responsive in their relationship with their customers. So nothing but good things to say about them. But my concern, and what I'm rather for rather than against, is a neighborhood that expands and keeps safety and livability foremost amongst its concerns. And I do have worries about that now as someone who lives there. When we first purchased the home and we're looking at it, in speaking with several of the people involved, one of the things that we were told at that point was that Chestnut Street was going to go through to Monmouth, because we did have concerns about ingress and egress, and that still remains our major concern. From, again, a safety perspective, getting emergency vehicles in, getting police and safety in, if, God forbid, there's an issue, an accident, something happened. Now, 30 seconds, a minute can be the difference between someone living or dying. So getting that in and out is very, very crucial to the quality of livability in the neighborhood. As far as building the bridge over there, I mean, it's been 2.5 years since we moved in, and it was under discussion then. And I'm learning tonight that the developers have been paying taxes for 2.5 years to get that done, and nothing has happened. And so, again, for or against, I don't want to put this all on the developers. I think the city has to bear some responsibility. But I do feel and want to voice the opinion that while a traffic light at 7th and Monmouth would be nice, it would be great, it would solve some hassles and perhaps improve the safety, certainly would improve the safety. It ain't the problem. And what I would ask you to do, you showed a map of all of Independence. If any of you folks up there can point to a neighborhood in Independence, an existing neighborhood that has such limited ingress and egress as Brandy Meadows, approve it. Great, I'm wrong. I don't think you can. I don't think you can. When you look at how difficult it can be to get out of there and the limited number of options that don't involve twisting and turning and going through small and narrower residential streets, not collectors, I guess that's the right term. So that's kind of how I feel. That's where I believe your decision has to be based, is on developing that ingress and egress and the safety. The last comment I would like to make, and I'll get out of here, brought up the green spaces, which I think are very important, but the point that Commissioner Jay mentioned, I can't. There are tenements in New York City that have more parks and playgrounds for their residents than around us. There's kids everywhere, God bless them. They shouldn't be playing in the street, and they shouldn't have to walk 2 miles to get to a swing set or depend on their parents to put one in the backyard. I would certainly like to see, as part of the requirements of this development, some type of play space for children that is safe, lit, easily accessible by all of the families that are going to be moving into these lovely new homes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Ruby Osborne?
Hi, I'm Ruby Osborne. I live at 1097 South 7th Street, so right where all the traffic goes by. So I have some concerns. I literally cannot stand in my front yard and have a conversation with my neighbor without a truck going by and we have to stop. And it's constant. It starts early in the morning. It's busy when kids are going to school, when they're riding their bikes. So, of course, I'm concerned also about the road itself. It's showing signs of disrepair. In the event of a fire, putting 90 more homes in this neighborhood would be disastrous. And I urge you to Google Coffee Park in Santa Rosa, California. Very similar little community. When a fire hit, almost every house was gone. The trail that you speak of, again, it doesn't go anywhere. I mean, I've walked my dog down there. It goes a little bit one way, a little bit one way where the storm drain is. And to go through another property, I'm concerned about how long that's going to take. And probably my main concern is I was told that there's supposed to be a playground in this walkway between Chestnut and Maple. Nothing has happened. This is what it looks like. It's just weeds and dirt. So it's a walkway from one street to the next with nothing there for kids. So there's no park. There's no place for the kids to play. A dog park would be nice. And where are these I thought I heard 186 families? Where are these kids gonna go to school? As a retired teacher, I can tell you that's going to have a huge impact on your school system. So I'm urging you to work really closely with your school district. Building a community is not about just building houses. It's about building places where people can gather, where they can gather with their pets, where they can gather with their kids, and where everyone feels safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we move to city staff summary, response, or public testimony, or to public testimony. Do you have any response, Fred?
Yeah, I was taking notes, and shoot, I guess normally I kind of like to summarize what are important points to address, and I guess I didn't quite get to that. I do agree with Harvey, Mr. Cummings, that the make it or break it point is the consideration of what to do with the traffic light. I do also not agree with Harvey the fact that that the way that we did it was somehow burdensome unnecessarily to the applicant. When I look at the traffic impact analyses, what I see is the intersection performs fine till 2027 without this development. When the development's included, the intersection is no longer functioning. Also, when you incorporate the next phase, the Brandy Meadows number 4, we're talking about, according to my calculations, 410 new peak hour trips from the south. That's 76%, according to my calculations, of the additional traffic. Just to give you an order of magnitude, we're talking going from 1,325 existing trips, adding 410 additional trips during peak hour trips with both subdivisions. I guess my point is it is being driven a lot by these two developments, is what I would argue. Also, I will dispute the point just a little bit. Not everybody in the community is going to benefit from a light at 7th Street. We have a number of folks in the north portion of the community that don't necessarily go through 7th Street on a typical basis, a typical day. We've got folks that live on Corvallis Road that don't necessarily go into the southwest portion of the community. I will just say, I am more than open to discuss proportions. If my calculations are somehow wrong, I am more than fine to be told I'm wrong and to be shown that I'm wrong, and that's not going to hurt my feelings. I guess what I would dispute though is that that this should be that this would benefit the whole community. I would dispute that, at least in part. And I will just say there are a whole number of findings that I included as part of this. This thing that I provided to you, I would still stand by those until I'm shown otherwise based on data. I do think that the fee contribution is an interesting idea. I guess I would just want to understand how something like that would work more. I don't think that was. Here is Gerald to discuss that a little bit.
So the fee for the bridge was put in place because the bridge was not identified and the TSP wasn't done. There were no projects. But they knew they needed to make a connection as part of the Southwest Concept Plan. And so they did, in the interim, a fee in lieu. Brandy Meadows 2 and Brandy Meadows 3 paid into that fee. Once we did the updated transportation master plan and set the system development charges and the CIP, it included the bridge. So we no longer charge a fee based on acreage. It's paid for, the bridge portion of the project is paid for through the payment of system development charges. It doesn't pay for the road leading up to the bridge because that's a responsibility of the developer. The other thing to consider is that the location of the bridge is not on property owned by the city, and it's not on property owned by this applicant. It's outside and to the west of that. So we can't just arbitrarily build a bridge on property we don't own and we don't have money for. The amount of money that we collected is in the tens of thousands for a $4 million bridge. And that's just the bridge structure. So not the roads leading up to it, okay? So that's a little background on the bridge and where that fee per acre came from. That is no longer in existence. It's paid for through SDCs.
So I had a question on the percentages that you were going over. From the numbers you gave, it sounds like it's going to go from about 1,300 daily people going through to 1,700. That would represent, I think, they would be around 18% of the total traffic in a day. Is that something that the city would be looking to adopt as a amount that they would be comfortable with?
So again, the part of my hesitation with that is it just doesn't make sense to me. Partially because the intersection has capacity in it. That's something that residents and taxpayers have paid for years. There's literally a turn lane at the intersection right now. There's four legs that come off the intersection, right? That the intersection can handle 1,400 trips right now. So saying, okay, we've added this much and therefore we only pay 5%, that doesn't make sense. That assumes that you're essentially building something brand new, creating all the capacity and saying of all the capacity we've created, we get 5%. Now, an alternative that we've heard discussed is potentially looking at the ultimate capacity associated with the intersection or the ultimate capacity anticipated in the transportation system plan. That's great, but I mean, like I said earlier, when I consider both of these developments together and I weigh them versus the capacity that's anticipated for the northbound traffic going to that intersection, these two projects eat up all of that capacity, right? It's 106% of the capacity when you compare them side by side. So that's why it's like, I do think that we need to discuss this proportion more. Personally, I don't know what the right answer is. Like I say, I'm more than willing to hear where I've been wrong or anything like that. But I do not believe that saying we drive 5% of the traffic at this intersection, therefore we are accounted, we only have to pay 5%. I don't believe that makes sense. Now we did hear sort of shifting things. We did hear some things about green space. Again, one thing that you folks have to weigh is what do the criteria say? The criteria do not talk about building playgrounds. It doesn't talk about lighting the playgrounds or anything like that. What it specifically talks about is it talks about dedicating land for parking. And this is they are absolutely doing that. as part of this application. We did definitely hear from a number of folks who think that Chestnut going through is ultimate solution to some of these issues. I absolutely agree with that, 100%. I do also really appreciate the comment from Ms. Osborne who talked about it when we're, oh shoot, you said it so well, I didn't quite write it down. She said something about you got to think about more than just building houses, we're building communities. I think that that's a great comment. That's something that I absolutely try and achieve, especially on stuff like this. Now, it's really hard to conceptualize lots and stuff on a flat map, but I mean, these folks are building very high quality stuff here, and they are incorporating some very nice things like pedestrian amenities and whatnot that are going to create that sense of community place that everybody, I would say, in the room wants. We did hear about the limited ingress and egress. Again, we have been working with Polk County Fire to make sure that we're still meeting the standards with this. They don't have any concerns with this proposal. And they will look at all the engineering plans as they come in phase by phase. I don't know. I think that is a whole bunch of the comments there. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may. Okay.
And this one's in response to the applicant's request to not have to pay system development charges for parks. If you approve that, you'll be in violation of the city code for SDCs. And I'm going to read you this section and try to, if it's not quite clear, I'll explain it to you. Section 34442, fees and charges methodology. Section A talks about the establishment of a reimbursement fee, and the piece that I'm going to read to you refers to that. We're not talking about reimbursement fees because parks SDCs have no reimbursement portion. They only have an improvement portion. And Part B says, except when authorized in the methodology adopted under subsection A of this section, the fees required by this code, which are assessed or collected as part of a local improvement district or a charge in lieu of a local improvement district assessment, or the cost of complying with requirements or conditions imposed by a land use decision, are separate from and in addition to the system development charge, shall not be used as a credit on such charge. So the system development charges are charged to everybody who does new development. If you partition a lot and build another house, you pay the system development charges for parks because it doesn't pay for just what's in your area. It pays for the entire park system. So everybody that moves in, the people who actually end up paying the SDC, which is the home purchaser, they're the direct beneficiary of all of the improvements throughout the entire city. And that's what those SDCs are for. All, not just the improvements that are on the developer's site, that he's required to, under the planning code, to dedicate open space at 6.25%. So he's required to dedicate that amount of ground. But then on top of that, every single house that comes in is required to pay the system development charge for parks for the entire system so that we can build the pathways, we can do the new parks, we can buy new park ground. Anything that's designed and built into the parks master plan is where we get our SDCs from. So that last one that they asked you to do, if you do that, you're not going to be in compliance with the city code. So my recommendation is to throw that one I allowed to ask a couple of.
Go ahead.
1,700 divided by 1,300 is a 30%.
Can you get to the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry, Karen.
Bill Henley again. Just, the math on the, say, 1,700 versus 1,300, that's a 30% increase, which is much more than 5%, much less than 77%. So it's somewhere in between.
And just to make it clear, that's comparing both the future developments, right? And when you compare, when you just incorporate the one, it's 1,300 plus 186. So, and not all of that, and that's 47% of the 186 is associated with the development. We're just where I got the 47%.
And then the other comment was related to the 6.25% requirement for green space or whatever you call it. And so I guess what I'm saying is I love that idea. I love that whole concept of that walkway and the riparian area. And I just thought, is there some reason, there's nothing that says you can't do a little bit more than that, is what I'd like to see. But you don't want the developer to have to pay for lots that they don't really get any money back from either. So it's almost like, can the city, buy a selected small number of lots just to have more green space for greenery in general, water absorption, trees, but also maybe playgrounds for kids and things like that. That's all I got.
I got another question. Oh, yes, Mr. Dalkey, go ahead, come to this podium.
Okay, well, okay, we're talking about an unknown, and I'd like to ask a question. What do you think that intersection, that traffic light's gonna cost?
That's a great question, and you're exactly right. It's an unknown, and I mean, it's that's part of the reason why the ice is required. But it's also, I mean, I was sort of thinking about this. I've been thinking about this a lot. Unfortunately, the project is not in our capital improvement plan. And the reason it's not in our capital improvement plan is because it's not a priority of the city. That's why we don't know what the cost is, right? We don't have an estimated cost. We don't have it in our capital improvement program because it's not in our TSP. It's not a identified project because we wanted to build out west-east connectivity.
Okay, well, now, and I've heard numbers from 400,000 to 600,000 up to 3 million to 8 million. So I've heard a variety. That's my point, is there's no answer right now. And for me to take on this cost, it doesn't make sense. No, I don't know that any developer would walk into a project not knowing its cost and saying, I'll accept this. You just can't do it. So we need to come to I agree to the 5.5% is fair. That's the way these AKSs and analyzed it. And I know the city's looking at it different. And I'm hearing, about the parks SDC. So everywhere I look, we're trying to cooperate, but I seem to be, continually getting hit with additional costs. And I didn't talk about some of the additional costs from the first 3 phases that were hit on me earlier, but it was repairing I'd like to just real quickly, repairing 2 different street locations, Chestnut, and it was a developer from the past that came along and messed up, but the city put it on me, you're gonna repair this, which we did. We repaired it. They paid for a small portion of paving. But then Pacific Street, somewhere along the line, they designed a dead-end street to what they knew was a through street. But then they turned around and made me pay for that on the first phase, which I did. But, these things continually get thrown at the developer, but that's why I need to know my cost, especially for this signal. So right now I'm seeing that signal is very expensive. But again, if we can work together, I'm happy to pay the 5.5%. And I don't mean to sound greedy. I just think that's the right number that I'm hearing from the AKS engineering group. So thank you.
Is there any points to, I don't want to kick the can on this, but it seems like this is a team effort, team sport.
Correct,
And
yeah.
so is there any utility to maybe some sort of negotiation or continued conversation?
There's always room for
That-
negotiation.
That's not in this room sort of live, like as in if we sort of hunted for a week or two for a discussion, because I don't feel like I can put a percentage on, I don't know enough about, I'm not a transportation plan, or information expert. I feel uncomfortable saying 5.5% or 47% or 77% because it seems like this is an opportunity for maybe a further discussion with staff who are experts rather than doing this in the public. I mean, not that it shouldn't be public, and obviously we'll talk about it, in approval, but it just seems, I'm personally uncomfortable just throwing, it feels like almost like throwing a dart.
I don't think we should be throwing a number at it. I think
Yeah.
Fred opened it up to negotiations to talk to
Yeah.
AKS and kind of look at everything. And I think that's what needs to happen. It sounds like, that's the fair way to look at it. But again, if it's a number that we're negotiating a percentage of a number we don't even know.
Right.
So if it's $6 million, and I'm paying 50%, well, it doesn't make a lot of sense to move forward.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of stuck here, just so you know.
No, it's,
If we come up with a reasonable amount that I can say I can face, yeah, I'd like to move forward, continue what we're doing out there and try to address all these other issues we've talked about, which I think I have fairly, so that's my goal, is to continue what we've been doing. And again, if you haven't gone out and seen the project, it's a really nice project, and we want to continue to, help Independence grow and create more tax dollars, and I hope that it's a good thing. But if people don't see it that way, then, I appreciate that too. So I'm just listening. Thank you.
thank you.
At this point, let's proceed with the applicant's rebuttal. So Zach, you can come up and.
A lot to go through. I'm gonna hand it over to Michael Poisson real quick to.
Michael Poisson, 3700 River Road, Kaiser, Oregon. I'm a civil engineer on this project. I guess, as you've heard, I mean, there's pretty big make or break it issues. There's mainly the three of them. Condition 2 talks about us having to do the ice study prior to recording that phase 6 plat. Because we're one lot short of triggering the thing, of requiring the ice. Well, we're one lot short, so you can't require it, period. It's gotta be 6A, it's not triggered. And we had the traffic engineer talk to you about how she does all these conservative estimates, she factors in growth, she extrapolates everything, uses the worst hours, etc. It's not triggered. So condition 2 needs to be 6A. That's one item. Condition 3, we beat around this proportionality. I gotta tell you, I work on subdivisions all over Oregon, and I haven't seen a jurisdiction try to interpret proportionality by just using new trips. I've never, ever seen that. So I think you're setting yourself up for legal challenges if you guys go this way. Proportionality is done by the background traffic, how much traffic is added to the system, as the traffic engineer explained. That comes up with 5.5%, okay? I know you don't like the argument, Fred, but just people do use 7th and Monmouth, maybe not in some of the subdivisions you talk about, but I mean, in 2020, there was 3,173 homes in Independence. We're building 126 homes. So that's 3.9% I should be paying then. So there's 186 homes we're building. The average home has 2.5 people in it, including apartments. That's 465 people. There's 10,190 people in Independence. So I should be paying 4.6 towards the intersection. We think the 5.5% is reasonable, and it's based on our experience doing thousands of subdivisions in Oregon. We do more subdivisions in this state than any other firm. We thought that was a fair way to put this together, and that's how we've done it in every other jurisdiction. And I think when attorneys get involved, if it goes worse, you're gonna lose. And I just don't see why we'd want to do that. So, so the other challenge I guess I have for you here tonight is if new SDC charges include the cost of a bridge, that we all know if Chestnut Bridge gets built, there's no problem at the intersection. Okay? Our developer in phases, the first phase of the subdivision, paid $10,000 an acre roughly towards the bridge, $150,000. Now we're going to pay higher SDCs to go towards the bridge. How can you sit there and say that we got to pay more than 5.5% at an intersection? We're basically paying for both improvements. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have us pay for the whole signal plus pay for the whole bridge. So when the bridge gets built, who's writing a check back to the developer? I mean, it's double dipping. You can't just take and take and take. It doesn't work that way. It's not legal. That's the whole rational nexus thing we were trying to talk to you guys about tonight. So I guess we disagree, obviously, on this. And the third issue is the SDCs having to donate land that has a cost, plus build stuff in the park to try to improve it, and then pay systems development charges on top of that. How is that not double dipping? The guy's giving you the property, 5 acres of land along the river that could be high value homes, right? As a park to try to honor the Southwest Independence Concept Plan and to try to build a nice community so that there's access to Ash Creek and then to charge us SDCs on top of that? Does that mean we can put up a fence and all the residents have to stay out of our park because, we're not paying SDCs for their park? No, you can't keep taking both. It's not legal. So those are the three issues we brought up. The rest of everything in the report, we totally agree with, and everybody's been great to work with. We've just got these 3 sticking points that are gonna break the project. So, Zach, do you have anything else to add? Okay, thank you.
Just a couple
Thank you.
of other things, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
So there were some comments made by members of the public I want to make sure we address before we close the record or leave it open. There's a comment from Mr. Bill Henley regarding more open space, the need for more open space. I think your staff did a good job of kind of expressing how that open space requirement is provided in the context of a subdivision. And just a reminder, the idea in this area is that open space be concentrated along Ash Creek, and that's been the city's vision since about 2012 when that plan was put together. So that's the idea. The other thing that we see recently from cities with regard to small parks that are kind of more evenly distributed throughout a neighborhood or a larger area, is that those small parks are pretty tough to maintain. So I suspect that was part of the city's justification for wanting this larger consolidated area rather than a bunch of small pocket parks. Those pocket parks are, typically more cost to maintain than the benefit that they provide. Mr. Rocker expressed some concerns about safety and livability. As staff pointed out, this plan was reviewed by the fire department, and while of course more access to the site is ideal, there is sufficient fire access. Fire department so is making sure that there are at least 2 points of access into and out of the neighborhood. So from kind of an emergency and life safety building permit standpoint, those standards are all met, and this neighborhood is perfectly safe from that point of view. Of course, again, Chestnut Street Bridge and other east-west connectivity will only further improve that. There were some comments on both sides about the city's responsibility for participating in the cost of an eventual improvement, either at 7th Street or somewhere else. And again, I think we just philosophically disagree with staff on how that proportion is ultimately determined. Again, your staff is taking trips relative to the available capacity, and we're considering total trips relative to all the trips at the intersection, right? And so I think our justification has more to do with, assuming that an improvement is made and some group of parties participate in the cost of making that improvement, the cost to make that improvement, what is our proportionate impact to that? And we want to pay that proportionate share. So I think it's just a philosophical difference on how we calculate that and how we get to that 5.5%. You heard from Michael that there's a bunch of different ways you could slice that. We believe that 5.5% is fairly conservative and is a fair way to approach it. Mrs. Osborne made a comment that community is about more than building homes, and we couldn't agree with that more. In fact, I think that's one of the big reasons why we like working in Independence. It's a fantastic community. And I think I mentioned this at the start of my initial presentation. One of the things that makes it a fantastic community is that there's still places where young families, new families, families of all ages can still buy a home and still can afford to rent a home. And that's one of the great things about making a community too, is that you have a diverse group of folks that can live together in a neighborhood and not just one demographic. And that's something we see a lot in communities where the burden to make public improvements is so great that there's only one housing type that can reasonably bear the cost of those homes. With regard to, we mentioned this already, but I just want to hit on again, the Parks SDC. I think there's maybe some more to know about the Parks SDC. I agree with Mr. Fisher that the Parks SDC does. It's section 34-439 of the city's municipal code. It does say that this can be applied in addition to any condition of approval. I think that's potentially an illegal way to do it without knowing what the city's methodology for determining the per unit, per home SDC. It's impossible to say, but I can tell you that with our 98 lot subdivision, under the current SDCs, we will pay just under $775,000 in total Parks SDC. And that's on top of, dedicating land and paying fees already, right? And so I don't think it was the city's intent that, or maybe a better way to put it is, I don't think the SDC fee has been adjusted down to account for the additional requirement to dedicate land. I think that's mentioned in the code in two places, and it's probably done that way in error. And I would just encourage the city to look at that again. But again, the city's Parks SDC is pretty close in line. It's just for your information, it's about $4,300 per new single family home. So every time a new single family home comes in for a building permit, the fee for that home that gets distributed straight to the Parks SDC is $4,300. Just so you know, the total SDC, including transportation SDCs, water, storm, parks, is just under $25,000 per home. So the total SDC burden for all of the homes in this subdivision, assuming no credits are issued and assuming those conditions are in place, is just under $4.5 million. So that's a fee on top of all of those public improvements we talked about before. The builders will pay to the city a total of $4.5 million in addition. So just so you know, and again, that SDC is for the purpose of expanding capacity in the city's transportation system, park system, across the board, right? Because new people, the expectation is that new people are moving into town, they need more parks, they need more streets, and that's what that SDC is for. So it's very important that we consider that when we're talking about other public improvements, especially public improvements that occur away from our site, off-site. I think that responds to all of the points that we wanted to make. I'm happy to answer any last minute questions.
Questions? Thanks, Zach. Okay, Karen and Fred, you can help me here. Do I close the public hearing and it can be reopened if we can't come to a consensus vote tonight?
I mean, I guess it's,
And if we decide to keep it open, do we have to have a motion and a vote amongst the commission?
yeah.
You know, obviously, I think when I hear lawyers and lawsuits come to mind here tonight, I think there's more, maybe you folks could get together and iron this out before we make a final decision.
The only way that I suppose that makes sense is if the applicant is amenable to that. If under state law, we have to process a development application within 120 days. Based on that, the only way that that we would feel comfortable with that is if Mr. Dolke was fine with extending that time period.
Yeah, I confirmed with the applicant, we're okay with the 2-week extension if that works, to talk more with staff about what that reasonable proportion looks like.
And this is where we're trying to iron out conditions 2 and 3?
Correct.
Yes.
Access.
Okay with their proposed amendment for 2, which is back to 6 now. We initially wrote that condition, tried to keep that process moving forward so that it wasn't stalled out or didn't get worked on. And project 6A came up. That study had been done and gone through this part of the which doesn't allow them to move forward with any design on the signal. And so they only get built phases 5 and 6, and everything stops. But if they believe they can get it all done by the time they get to the end of 6A, then from a public works standpoint, I don't have any objection to modifying that in 6 and 6A.
So is that addressed in what you
Does
have?
not address condition 3. So.
Are we talking about, Fred, your condition on page 6?
Yeah,
Or he's
right,
given
and
us
then
the
as revised
Yeah,
condition.
but I know this, and I'm trying, they don't correspond very well.
So 2 weeks, are you guys gonna be made available to have a discussion?
Yes,
within 2
absolutely.
weeks?
In order for us to meet that requirement, we have to have our transportation engineer work one-on-one with them to come to a decision on proportionality. And then their attorneys and our attorney basically has to say yes, because if it goes sideways, the attorneys are gonna get involved. So in order for us to do that, we have to have our transportation consultants review and say, this is what it needs to be. They have to be in agreement with it, otherwise we're not. So I don't know if the consultant can get that done in 2 weeks or not.
I feel pretty confident that our team can negotiate a reasonable number with your team over the course of the next 2 weeks. And however we decide to get there, whether it's, some combination of policy and data-driven implements, I think that's probably what's gonna happen. But I think, we're committed to working quickly to getting this moving. Like you heard from the applicant earlier, they're really hoping that they can start construction this summer. That's important to them. They've got crews that are planning to mobilize. There's a big cost for them if they can't meet summer construction. And we're kind of getting close to the window where that's becoming less and less possible.
Just Mr. J, if I close the public hearing and we have a vote and approve this, I see legal action coming before this. So that's why I'm suggesting.
We would recommend, based on that, to keep the record open for us to bring the additional.
We'll revisit this at a later date.
Back to you.
If I could request that we only leave the record open for this one specific condition of approval and the purpose of negotiating around condition of approval 3. I mean, that just helps simplify things.
We can't approve this just with that. We need to have it all at one time, right?
I would say so, yeah.
And what about your conditional ones, potential conditions, A, B, and C?
Well, as far as I know, they haven't,
Yeah.
they were only hung up on 2 and 3. Mr. J?
It's curious, you were talking 6A, not 6B, SDC.
You see?
I was talking about
The traffic.
The requirement for the code within SDC.
to the city code, we may disagree on that concept, but it's the same here as it is.
Do you have a question, Becky?
I'm just,
So based on that, I would recommend that if we're talking a 2-week extension, that would mean we would need to schedule a meeting within something like 2 weeks. Is that appropriate?
you mean
Guys,
with
I'm
them?
asking you folks.
Oh, that was a
first.
question. Well, that's absolutely okay with our team. I assume that was a question for the commission.
Okay, so let's go ahead and look at a calendar then. Is it gonna work for you folks?
No.
Well, they're giving us
It has to
2
be
Not in
before
control of
June
the calendar.
22nd for me. Or Alex will have to
Chair of the meeting.
pick up the slack.
So I'm looking
Are you
at the
thinking
week
the
of the 12th sometime, week of the 12th. We have a council meeting on the 13th.
12th would be, 12th.
Monday the 12th. Sounds
Monday
like the
the
12th
12th.
works for most of us.
We have a regular plan commission on Monday the 5th, right?
I'll push that meeting to the 12th. Just so we can
Combine both meetings? Okay.
oh, maybe not. I'll try.
Well, whatever.
Let us know.
Okay.
So for June 12th.
The 12th?
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
We'll figure it out.
Well, at this point, then, do we motion to keep the,
Yeah, so your motion is I move to keep the record for this public hearing open till a date certain, and that date is for June 12th. Wait, June 12th at 6:30. For that one. For condition 3.
should I have one of the commissioners read what's on the bottom here, Karen?
I think it's just condition 3.
But we will have to approve the whole thing then. We're not going to conditionally approve part of it tonight,
Right.
right?
Just going to take additional testimony on Commissioner.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And so the record will be open for the 2 weeks, then the hearing will continue at that point.
Okay.
Are you okay with them just going ahead and being
The question was, what about these potential conditions? So it was already him. Okay. Hold on.
Just to repeat this. Can I read it? Yeah, but I could read that.
I guess if I may, and I'm sorry to be high maintenance here, I would like to take this opportunity to do a little bit more research on that SDC question. And so if we could leave the record open for condition 3 and 6B and allow us to provide some more definitive testimony as to how the city's parks SDC is calculated.
I'm sorry, your condition, which one?
It's the one that they proposed that was
Oh.
6 feet that was on this slide.
Oh,
It's on Gerald Fisher's,
oh, okay, not in yours. There we go.
And this condition reads that our subdivision is not exempt from SDC charges, and like I mentioned before, we feel that we've sufficiently paid those SDCs in prior phases. I think we need to do a little bit more work on the city's SDC methodology for the parks SDC to kind of have some definitive answer there. And I guess I'd appreciate, since we're going to leave it open for a couple of weeks, we could use that time to look into that as well.
We'll leave the record open to condition bonus. And then directing staff to bring back modified decision.
Can I do a so moved? Or do I need to read it?
Aaron, you read it very nicely.
Yeah, it was great.
We had a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Yep.
Jordan.
Oh, very surely.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
We don't have any video tonight?
No.
Video.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.